The name appeared quietly without prelude, on the margin of a file almost no one was meant to see. 3IAtlas. It had no explanation, no introduction, only the impression of something that was both bureaucratic and cosmic. The combination of letters and numbers carried the weight of secrecy, like a code whispered through locked corridors. In itself it meant nothing. But for those who later pieced together fragments of forgotten archives, it became a seed. An enigma so dense that it seemed to bend entire narratives around it. To begin with, Atlas is to begin in silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of a vast expanse where sound would have no meaning. The stillness between stars, the deep pause before a vision breaks. Those who worked in the hidden corners of Cold War intelligence believed silence could be broken, not only by radios or satellites, but by the human mind itself. In the early 1970s, files later known collectively as the Stargate documents revealed that American agencies were experimenting with something unthinkable, using trained individuals to see across space and time. They called it remote viewing. It was not the invention of science fiction, but a real line item in classified budgets, buried among surveillance satellites and coded intercept programs. Within this strange world of psychic espionage, most of what was seen remained ordinary. Glimpses of bunkers, test facilities, ships at sea. Yet in rare moments something stranger broke through, something that did not belong to Earth's inventory of secrets. Among the thousands of pages declassified in the late 1990s, researchers noticed a handful of references that seemed disjointed, almost accidental. Sketches of landscapes without horizon, notes describing structures unearthly, possibly metallic, coordinates that did not match any earthly geography, and next to a few of these anomalies, the word Atlas. Why Atlas? In Greek myth, Atlas was the titan condemned to hold the sky upon his shoulders. His punishment was eternal, his task cosmic. To invoke Atlas in the sterile language of an intelligence report seemed almost poetic, as though the analysts themselves did not know how else to classify what was being described. Perhaps it was shorthand, perhaps a symbolic marker to suggest a burden too immense for ordinary categories, or perhaps it was chosen deliberately, echoing the myth of a figure forced to bear something beyond comprehension. The spark of Atlas was not born in myth, however. It was born in a room without windows, where a subject sat with eyes closed, describing what appeared in the theatre of the mind. These sessions were sometimes recorded, sometimes transcribed by stenographers, often incomplete. The fragments that survive give the impression of someone groping through fog, sentences interrupted, metaphors straining to capture an alien scene. Towering machines. No, not machines, but structures, humming, pressure in the air. Lines like these were not unusual in remote viewing, but what caught attention was the insistence that the scene did not feel earthly. The viewer claimed a sense of distance, immeasurable, cold, and vast. It is tempting to dismiss such visions as the products of suggestion, imagination stirred by the very act of being told to see something hidden. Yet these accounts were not solitary inventions. Over years, different viewers, working blind and unaware of one another's sessions, produced sketches that bore uncanny resemblance. Angular forms, repeating symbols, a surface that appeared smooth, metallic, reflective, and stretching toward horizons that seemed larger than any landscape they knew. One analyst wrote in the margin, "Not terrestrial." Another simply drew a question mark beside the word Atlas. From the beginning, the mystery carried a paradox. The most fantastic claims came from within some of the most rigidly pragmatic institutions. Intelligence work thrives on verification, on data, on what can be photographed and measured. And yet here, in a program designed to gain advantage over adversaries, something slipped through, something that could not be reduced to coordinates on a map of Earth. That was the spark. Not merely that someone described an alien scene, but that the description was preserved, coded, and filed rather than discarded. Someone thought it mattered. If we step back to the larger picture of the era, we see why such a possibility was not immediately rejected. The Cold War was an age of extremes, where both superpowers invested in experiments that blurred the line between science and the occult. The Soviets explored telepathy and psychotronics. The Americans funded psychic spies. radar, satellites, nuclear submarines. Every frontier was pushed, because the fear of falling behind was greater than the fear of ridicule. In such an atmosphere, even improbable visions could be tolerated so long as there was the faintest chance they might yield insight. Atlas entered through this crack, improbable, unprovable, yet impossible to ignore. The spark glowed brighter when compared against older traditions. Remote viewing may have been wrapped in the language of military research, but the act itself resembled practices found in shamanic rituals, oracular trances, and mystical journeys described for millennia. Cultures from Siberia to Mesoamerica told of individuals who could travel in spirit to distant realms, bringing back knowledge of landscapes, ancestors, or gods. What intelligence officers called targets, shamans might have called spirit worlds. The resonance was striking. And when the word Atlas appeared, it seemed to bridge these domains. Mythic burden, cosmic distance, military code. Those who study myths often point out that names are never accidental. To invoke Atlas is to invoke the image of a horizon beyond which human sight falters. In the oldest depictions, Atlas is not merely carrying the heavens, but is placed at the edge of the known world, a guardian where maps ended. The spark of Atlas, then, was not only a fragment of intelligence bureaucracy, it was the reawakening of an archetype, the watcher at the boundary, the bearer of a weight beyond measure. But was it only symbol? Or did the viewers truly glimpse something external, a landscape that exists beyond Earth, waiting in the interstellar dark? That is the question that keeps the spark alive. If imagination alone, why the consistency? If coincidence, why the preservation of records? And if genuine, what was Atlas? A place, an object, a memory of something not yet understood. The first part of this journey leaves us with nothing resolved, only the glimmer of a path that winds into obscurity. The word Atlas shines faintly from a file margin. A voice describes machines that may not be machines. A titan condemned to hold the heavens watches silently from myth. Between them lies the possibility of a connection, fragile, improbable, yet persistent enough to survive decades of secrecy. And in the silence that follows, one detail echoes. A line in a transcript where the remote viewer paused and simply said, "It is not here, it is far away." No coordinates, no name, only the weight of distance. That line remains, suspended like a signal faintly received across static, a whisper that pulls us forward into the deeper corridors of 3IAtlas. For years, the Atlas reference lingered as a footnote, little more than an enigma scribbled in margins. Its meaning might have dissolved entirely if not for the strange persistence of paper. Not everything made the leap into the digital era. Boxes of forgotten files remained in basements and storage vaults, waiting for someone to open them. One such box, mislabeled and buried in a lot of declassified records, carried the title Unprocessed, Project Sunstreak. Inside were brittle pages, onion-skin transcripts, diagrams smudged with graphite. Among them, scattered like loose threads, the word appeared again. Atlas. The file had no coherent narrative. It was not a report, but a mosaic of fragments. A slip of paper marked with numbers resembling astronomical coordinates, but not corresponding to any known star chart. A hand-drawn sketch of geometric towers rising from a flat horizon, annotated with the phrase structures non-natural. A memo in typewriter font. Possible relevance to subject Atlas, retained for further analysis. The deeper one read, the more the documents felt less like intelligence and more like a dream recorded by bureaucrats. At the centre of the file lay one transcript unlike the others. It began as many did. The viewer seated, the monitor guiding, the attempt to quiet the mind. The monitor's voice, calm and deliberate, instructed the viewer to describe impressions without interpretation. At first the words came haltingly. Cold, dark, metallic surface. Then a pause, then more urgent. I see. A tall line, vertical, shimmering, vibrating. It's not natural. The transcript grew more agitated. There's a resonance, like humming inside the body. I can't tell if it's structure or sound, feels alive. The monitor asked for clarification. The viewer's response was cryptic. Not alive as we know it. Alive as presence. A machine that is also waiting. The lines broke off. A note was added in the margin. Subject terminated session abruptly. Distressed. Refused continuation. That refusal was rare. Viewers were trained to push through discomfort, to detach, to observe dispassionately. For someone to end a session themselves implied something beyond endurance. The file gave no explanation, only silence where commentary should have been. The accompanying sketches added to the strangeness. The towers were drawn with uneven but insistent strokes, as though the hand could not stop tracing their outline. They were rectangular, rising vertically, but with a curvature at the edges that made them seem both artificial and organic. One page included a sphere hovering above the horizon, with lines radiating outward like signals. At the bottom, in hurried script, "Not on Earth." When these fragments first came to light, skeptics dismissed them as meaningless. Remote viewing had been controversial from the beginning, accused of producing more noise than signal. Yet there was something about the Atlas file that resisted dismissal. It was not the grandeur of the vision, but the bureaucratic reaction. If it had been mere fantasy, why preserve it with such care? Why annotate it with reminders to retain? In intelligence work, paper was weight. To keep a page was to declare it potentially valuable. The forgotten file carried another anomaly, a set of numbers repeated across multiple documents. At first they looked like random sequences, perhaps catalogue codes. But when plotted by curious researchers decades later, they formed approximate coordinates, not on Earth's surface but pointing outward. The alignment corresponded vaguely to a region of sky near the constellation Lyra. Nothing remarkable was known to exist there at the time, but the recurrence suggested intentionality, as though the numbers meant something to those who recorded them. There was also the matter of language. Scattered across the file were references to signal anomalies. The phrase appeared in memos, in handwritten notes, even in the margins of sketches. It suggested that the visions were not considered purely subjective. Someone, somewhere, seemed to believe there was data, signals, measurable anomalies that paralleled the remote descriptions. If such data existed, it has not resurfaced publicly. But the repetition of the phrase gives the impression that the Atlas sessions were tied to more than imagination alone. Legends often begin with fragments like these. A few phrases, a drawing, an unexplained reaction. From them grows a story that persists beyond its source. The forgotten file became just such a seed. Among conspiracy researchers and alternative historians, Atlas became shorthand for a lost case study in otherworldly contact. Forums circulated images of the sketches, interpreting them as visions of alien structures, interstellar probes, or dimensional gateways. None of this was in the file itself, but the absence of explanation invited projection. In the vacuum left by secrecy, imagination fills the void, and yet, not all of the strangeness belongs to imagination. Within the file, one page bears an annotation that chills with its simplicity. Cross-reference with unverified imagery. Possible correlation. No image is attached. No description of what imagery was meant. Just the implication that somewhere, something visual existed that bore resemblance to what the remote viewers described. Whether that was satellite photography, telescope data, or something else remains a mystery. The words alone are enough to unsettle. Consider the context. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union were racing not only across Earth, but into space. Satellites photographed every corner of the globe. Probes were launched toward distant planets. Radio telescopes listened for whispers from the cosmos. In this frenzy, anomalies were inevitable, signals misinterpreted, images unclear. Most were discarded, but a few perhaps resisted explanation. If a remote viewer's vision aligned with such an anomaly, it would not be dismissed lightly. The forgotten file may have been such a case. Even more unsettling is the absence of closure. The file does not end with conclusions, but simply stops, as though the investigation was cut short. No summary, no analysis, only fragments. The lack of resolution feels intentional, as if something was redacted not by black ink but by omission itself. Silence as censorship. The forgotten file leaves us with images that are hard to shake. Vertical towers vibrating in silence, a humming resonance felt inside the body, a machine that seems alive but not alive, coordinates pointing outward into the constellation Lyra, and hovering above it all the word Atlas, inscribed without explanation, At the end of the file, one page is marked only with 3 characters, 3I. No elaboration, just the number and 2 letters, as though they alone were sufficient to designate the case. Later, when astronomers discovered an interstellar object passing through our solar system, they gave it the official designation 1I Shun Oumuamua. The coincidence of notation, interstellar objects marked with I, would only become meaningful decades later. But here, in a forgotten Cold War file, the code 3I stood silently, waiting to be noticed. As the pages close, we are left with an impression not of knowledge but of incompletion. A file that was never meant to explain, only to record, and in that incompletion lies its haunting power. The forgotten file does not give us answers, but it points a finger outward, towards something far beyond Earth, something that might exist or might be nothing more than the echo of imagination pressed into paper. What lingers is the sound not recorded in the transcripts, the abrupt end of a session, the silence of a viewer refusing to continue. Silence heavier than words. Silence that suggests more was seen than could be spoken. And so the forgotten file does not end but lingers like a half-remembered dream. It leaves us with a question unasked in the pages but felt between the lines. What could be so immense, so alien, that even in a vision it became unbearable? The answer does not lie in the file, but the silence it carries leads us to the next step, where a different kind of eye begins to open, not of paper or transcript, but of vision itself. There are moments in the archives where the ink seems to tremble, as though the hand writing it was not entirely steady. One such moment lies in the earliest complete session linked to Atlas. The transcript does not begin with fanfare. It begins with stillness, subject enters relaxed state, instructed to clear mind, monitor guides focus. At first, the words are plain, almost banal. It feels cold, empty, no sound. But then, like a lens coming into focus, the impressions sharpen. Flat. Endless. Structures rising. Very tall. Too tall. The lines read like the first glimmers of a dream, tentative, half-formed, until suddenly they harden into imagery with unnerving detail. The remote eye, once opened, seemed unwilling to close. The viewer described surfaces that gleamed, smooth and metallic but not reflective like glass, more like a polished stone that absorbed light rather than scattering it. He spoke of planes that stretched without curve, as if the horizon itself had been extended. "It doesn't bend," he said at one point, almost whispering. "The ground goes straight, 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 further than Earth could." He added something more cryptic. "It feels engineered." The monitor pressed gently, reminding him not to interpret. Describe, do not explain. The viewer tried again. The air, if it is air, is thick, heavy, not breathable, pressure on the chest. His breathing grew ragged according to the notes. At one point he placed his hand against his sternum as though trying to relieve an unseen weight. Then with sudden force he exclaimed, "They are watching." Silence followed. The transcript shows no words for several lines, only the monitor repeating instructions to remain calm. When the viewer spoke again, the tone was different, lower, urgent, unsettled. "I can't tell if it's them, or the place itself, but it knows I am here." This was not the first time a remote viewing subject described a sense of being observed. In earlier sessions unrelated to Atlas, viewers had reported a presence at distant locations, as if the act of looking opened the possibility of being seen. But here, in this context, the words carried a sharper edge. The forgotten file hinted at this moment, but in the full transcript the unease is palpable. "It's aware," the viewer said, and then stopped again. The monitor wrote afterward that the subject seemed unwilling to articulate further, as though words themselves might expose him to danger. To skeptics, such language reads like a projection of the subconscious, a fear woven into the experience of sitting blindfolded in silence. But to others, it echoes something much older, the ancient traditions of the Watchers. In Mesopotamian myth, the Apkallu, semi-divine beings, were said to descend to teach knowledge but also to observe humanity. In Jewish Apocrypha, the Watchers were angels who looked upon the earth, forbidden yet compelled. In each tradition, to be observed by such beings was a burden, a sign that one had glimpsed a realm not meant for mortal eyes. The parallel is difficult to ignore. As the session continued, the descriptions grew stranger. "There are towers, yes," the viewer repeated, "but not buildings, not built for living. More like instruments. They vibrate. The vibration isn't sound, it's inside the head, like standing inside a bell." Asked to sketch, he drew vertical columns with arcs around them, as though something unseen radiated outward. In later years, when these sketches surfaced, some compared them to radio towers or Tesla coils, others to ritual obelisks. But the drawing was simple, childlike, more impression than blueprint. At one point, the monitor asked what is their purpose. The viewer hesitated. "To send," he said finally, "or to hold, I can't tell. Sending, but also containing." The ambiguity clings to the words: a signal, a prison, a beacon. The transcript provides no resolution. What is striking is not only what the viewer saw, but how he reacted. He shifted between awe and dread, between compulsion to describe and refusal to continue. His physical reactions are noted in the margins: elevated pulse, perspiration, hands trembling. This was unusual. Most remote viewing sessions, even when vivid, were calm affairs, with subjects detached from what they described. Here, by contrast, the subject was visibly shaken. The remote eye, once opened, had revealed something that seemed less like a scene and more like a confrontation. The aftermath of the session adds another layer of intrigue. According to a memo tucked into the file, the subject requested reassignment. He no longer wished to participate in Atlas-related targets. He continued to work on ordinary tasks, describing buildings, ships, terrain, but he refused further sessions linked to those coordinates. The memo does not explain whether his request was granted, only that it was under consideration. His unease, however, remained etched into the transcripts. From this moment, Atlas took on a reputation within the small community of remote viewers. Though they were not told specifics of their targets, rumours circulated. Viewers whispered of the place that watches back, of structures that hum. Even those who had never worked the Atlas sessions felt the weight of its reputation. In intelligence work, rumour often travels faster than fact, and here the rumour was enough to instill unease. Outside the closed walls of the program, few would hear of this until decades later. But among those who study anomalies, the resonance of such visions is profound. The imagery of towers, hum, presence, observation. These motifs echo across cultures and ages. Consider the myths of the Nemeton in Celtic lore, sacred groves where stone pillars marked the presence of gods, or the Mayan stelae, tall stone monuments aligned with celestial events, or the Egyptian obelisks, thought to channel the rays of the sun. Each culture carved vertical markers, towers of stone, as if to capture something unseen. The Atlas vision adds another echo. Not carved, not stone, but metallic and vibrating, instruments instead of monuments. Yet the motif remains. Science, when confronted with such claims, retreats to the measurable. Could the humming vibration be the brain's own rhythms misinterpreted under altered states? Neuroscience shows that sensory deprivation can heighten internal perception, making the body's own pulse or breath seem external. This is one explanation. Yet the details, structures, towers, sense of being observed, remain harder to explain as mere internal noise. The skeptic may argue it is coincidence. The believer may argue it is confirmation. Between them lies the unresolved space where the remote eye peers. The session ended abruptly, not with closure but with silence. The viewer said only one final phrase: "It is too big. I cannot see it all." Then he refused to continue. The monitor closed the session and the transcript stopped. No conclusion, no summary, just that fragment. Too big. The phrase has a resonance beyond its words, suggesting not only the physical size of what was seen, but its immensity and meaning. Too big for description, too big for endurance. This is where the remote eye opens widest, and also where it blinks shut. The vision reveals more than the subject can bear, and in that refusal, the mystery deepens. We are left with towers vibrating in silence, a hum felt inside the bones, a presence that observes, and a final acknowledgement of immensity. And beyond that immensity there is the shadow of a question left hanging. If something was indeed glimpsed, what lies at the heart of it? A machine? A signal? A burden carried across space? The transcript does not answer, but the silence that follows seems to hold its own weight, like the pause before a thunderclap. As we step out of the session, we find ourselves not with certainty but with a lingering impression. The remote eye opened onto a place that is not only distant but somehow aware, and that awareness does not recede with the closing of eyes. It lingers, like a gaze felt long after the watcher is gone. That lingering gaze becomes the bridge to what came next, the realization that such visions did not arise in a vacuum. They unfolded under the shadow of a larger contest, where entire nations competed not just for land or weapons, but for perception itself. The Atlas visions did not emerge in isolation. They were born inside an atmosphere thick with suspicion, secrecy, and rivalry. The Cold War was not merely a contest of missiles and armies, it was a contest of minds. Behind locked doors and coded budgets, both superpowers pushed the limits of science, psychology, and even the intangible. It was an age when almost anything could be funded if it promised advantage, no matter how strange. The United States, haunted by the fear of falling behind, had watched Soviet experiments with alarm. Reports filtered in, some exaggerated, some authentic, about psychotronic research in Moscow, telepathic experiments with cosmonauts, attempts to use altered states to control or extend human perception. Whether these stories were true mattered less than the possibility. If the Soviets were investing in the unseen, the Americans felt compelled to match them. Thus, in the shadow of rockets and nuclear arsenals, programs with softer names were born: Grill Flame, Sunstreak, Center Lane, and most famously, Stargate. Within these programs, a small cadre of soldiers, scientists, and civilians were trained in the odd discipline of remote viewing. It was not magic, they insisted, but a protocol, a process. Sit in a quiet room, empty the mind, let impressions arise, sketch what comes. The results were inconsistent, sometimes absurd, but often eerily precise. The discipline attracted both skeptics and believers. Skeptics saw pattern recognition in randomness. Believers saw evidence of a faculty hidden within the human mind. Amid this contested ground, Atlas appeared. The codename was never explained in official memos, but its recurrence hints that certain sessions were grouped under this designation. Why these sessions, and not others? The transcripts suggest one answer: their content did not fit terrestrial targets. Instead of missile silos or naval bases, viewers described structures beyond Earth, vast landscapes, presences that seemed aware. To assign them under a separate label may have been an attempt to contain the anomaly, to file the unclassifiable under a mythic name. The Cold War context matters, because it shows why such strange records were not immediately dismissed. In a different era, a report of vibrating towers on a metallic plane would have been laughed out of existence. But in the climate of Cold War paranoia, the absurd was tolerated, because the cost of ignoring a possible lead seemed greater than the cost of entertaining it. If there was even a chance that remote viewers could perceive hidden Soviet technology, or something more exotic, it was worth the experiment. There is evidence that Atlas was not confined to the United States. Declassified Soviet documents, though fragmentary, reveal parallel efforts. Soviet researchers spoke of extrasensory reconnaissance, of attempts to extend perception beyond ordinary limits. Rumors circulated in Western intelligence circles of cosmonauts reporting visions during deep space simulations, visions of structures, presences, watchers. Whether these accounts were real or Cold War propaganda is unclear, but the overlap is striking. Two rival nations, both peering into the invisible, both encountering motifs that echoed ancient myth. The geopolitical backdrop also shaped how Atlas was interpreted. To intelligence officers, everything was a potential weapon. If viewers described towers that seemed to hum with energy, one possibility was that they were glimpsing advanced Soviet radar or weapon systems. If they sensed being observed, perhaps it was an allegory for counterintelligence measures. Yet the further the sessions went, the less these rationalizations sufficed. Metallic plains, horizons too vast for Earth, air too heavy to breathe. These were not the features of enemy installations, they were something else entirely. Still, the Cold War left its imprint on the language. Words like target, signal, structures, instrument appear again and again. The viewers spoke in images, but the monitors translated into the vocabulary of intelligence. What might have been described as temples in another age became instruments. What might have been called spirits became presences. The mythic was recast in the lexicon of surveillance. Atlas, the titan who held the heavens, was here reduced to a project code, even as the vision seemed to demand something larger. One cannot help but imagine the rooms where these sessions were received. Windowless chambers in military facilities, fluorescent lights buzzing, a stenographer's fingers moving across the keys of an old typewriter. Outside, the Cold War ground on, nuclear submarines sliding under polar ice, satellites photographing every kilometre of Earth's surface. And yet, inside, a man or woman sat with eyes closed, describing towers on metallic planes, voices humming without sound. The juxtaposition is almost cinematic, the rational machinery of intelligence harnessing the irrational currents of vision. The Cold War also produced a peculiar phenomenon, the blending of science and superstition. Laboratories tested psychic claims alongside electromagnetism, parapsychology alongside advanced computing. The urgency of competition meant no avenue was entirely dismissed. Atlas lived in this liminal space, halfway between espionage and esotericism. To some, it was nonsense tolerated for lack of better leads. To others, it was the faint outline of a discovery too immense to fit the times. What is perhaps most telling is how quickly Atlas disappeared from view once the Cold War ended. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the urgency drained from psychic research. Budgets shrank, projects closed, files were boxed, stamped declassified, and left to gather dust. It was only decades later, when researchers combed through the remains, that Atlas re-emerged as a fragment of a forgotten dream. But the shadow of the Cold War still clings to it. The very fact that these visions were preserved, funded, and labelled testifies to the atmosphere of fear and possibility that defined that era. And within that atmosphere, one question remained unspoken but unavoidable. What if the enemy was not the only watcher? The Cold War was obsessed with surveillance. Who sees, who knows, who watches whom? Atlas, with its visions of presences observing the observer, inverted that logic. Here, the watchers themselves felt watched. In a conflict defined by eyes in the sky, Atlas whispered of eyes in the dark beyond the sky. That inversion left a trace in the margins of the files. In one memo, a line appears almost casually. If valid, implications are global, not adversarial. It is an extraordinary statement, tucked into an otherwise routine report. Global, not adversarial. Meaning, what was glimpsed was not about the Soviets or the Americans. It was about something larger, something indifferent to human borders. The memo does not expand on this thought. It merely records it, then returns to ordinary concerns. But the sentence remains, like a seed of unease planted in bureaucratic soil. The Cold War shadow therefore does more than explain why Atlas existed. It shows why Atlas mattered. It was tolerated not because anyone knew what it was, but because no one could afford to ignore what it might be. In that space of fear and possibility, visions of towers and watchers found a place to be recorded. The shadow of the Cold War gave them form, even if it could not give them meaning. As the programs wound down, and as the Cold War itself dissolved into history, Atlas slipped into obscurity. But shadows linger. They do not vanish with the passing of light. They bend, stretch, and wait. And in this shadow, Atlas waited too, preserved in fragments of transcripts and sketches, its meaning deferred to another time. That shadow lengthens now, as we move from the geopolitical to the visionary once more. For while nations competed in secret rooms, individuals continued to describe machines, presences, and landscapes not of Earth. And one session in particular stands out, a vision not of war, but of machines that seemed alive, humming in silence, waiting for something unknown. Among the scattered transcripts of Atlas, one motif appears again and again, as persistent as an echo: the machine that is not a machine. It is described in different words by different viewers, yet the essence remains. Something vast, vertical, humming, resonant. Not a building to dwell in, nor a weapon to wield, but an instrument, or perhaps something stranger, something alive. One transcript preserved in a box of files stamped Sunstreak begins quietly. The viewer is calm at first, describing open space, surface smooth, reflective. Then, almost abruptly, I hear a hum. No, not here. Feel. The words come fragmented but insistent. It's like standing beside power lines but thicker, in the chest, not the ears. When pressed, the viewer adds, "It's not mechanical in the way we know, but it is made, deliberate, shaped. It has purpose." The monitor asks, what is its function? The response is unsettling. It waits, it holds, it listens. These three verbs appear in multiple sessions, recorded years apart. Waiting, holding, listening. Not transmitting, not producing, but existing in a state of suspension, like an instrument poised before a note, like a sentinel at the edge of silence. Another viewer, in a separate session, described something similar but with different imagery. Columns rising, inside them motion, like gears but not gears. Something cycling, not physical movement, more like energy turning inward, folding. He paused, then added, "It is intelligent but not conscious, alive but not alive. It is aware in its function." The words straddle categories, neither fully mechanical nor biological. In the margins, an analyst scribbled a note. Possible metaphor, symbolic overlay. Intelligence officers were wary of interpretation. They preferred data, coordinates, sketches. Yet the language of the viewers refused to be stripped of its metaphor. Machines that hum without sound. Towers that vibrate inside the body. Awareness without consciousness. These are not technical specifications. They are visions, poised between description and myth. What makes these visions striking is their consistency. Remote viewing sessions were notorious for producing noise, errors, contradictions, fanciful details. Yet across Atlas, the imagery converges. Vertical structures, resonance, waiting. Even when the sketches vary, the motifs align. Analysts may have dismissed this as repetition born of suggestion, but to others, it suggested a pattern too insistent to ignore. The image of humming machines also resonates with myth. In ancient stories, gods were often described in mechanical terms: engines of the cosmos, wheels within wheels, chariots of fire. In Ezekiel's vision, the prophet speaks of living creatures accompanied by wheels full of eyes, moving with a hum like rushing water. In Hindu tradition, the concept of yantra, geometric instruments of divine power, suggests machines not built for labour, but for resonance with cosmic forces. And in Greek myth, Hephaestus forged automatons of metal that moved with uncanny life. In each case, the machine transcends utility. It becomes presence, symbol, function beyond comprehension. The Atlas visions evoke this same aura. The machines do not act, they exist. They are not engines of war or transport, but instruments of waiting. To those steeped in myth, they appear as modern echoes of divine machines humming in silence. To scientists, they resemble metaphors for unseen energies, radio towers, cosmic beacons, pulsars misinterpreted by the human mind. Yet the feeling remains the same, something immense, patient, resonant. The viewers themselves struggled with language. One wrote in his sketch, "Not machines, more like tuning forks." Another, like pillars vibrating with signal. A third, alive in purpose, not alive in body. Their words suggest a technology unlike anything on Earth, a technology less concerned with motion or consumption than with resonance, alignment, communication. Could these visions have been influenced by known technology? Some skeptics argue that viewers, consciously or unconsciously, borrowed from images of radar arrays, radio telescopes, or high-voltage power lines. The 20th century was filled with such structures, metal towers humming with invisible power. But the Atlas visions describe something more alien, not a lattice of steel beams, but smooth monoliths, polished surfaces, arcs of unseen vibration. Where Earth's machines are noisy, dirty and finite, Atlas machines are silent, clean, and infinite. The idea of humming machines also found curious echoes in science. Astronomers in the 20th century discovered pulsars, spinning neutron stars that emit rhythmic bursts of radio waves. When the first pulsar was detected in 1967, its signal was so regular that scientists nicknamed it LGM-1 for Little Green Men. The regular hum of the universe, mistaken at first for an alien beacon. Could Atlas viewers have somehow tapped into such cosmic rhythms? translating them into images of vibrating towers? Or did their visions reach towards something beyond pulsars, beyond natural astrophysics, toward instruments deliberately placed? One line in the transcript deepens the mystery. The viewer, after describing the hum, suddenly whispered, "It is a message, but not for us." The monitor asked him to clarify. He refused. Later in debriefing, he explained that the impression was overwhelming, impossible to translate. A message, yes, but directed elsewhere, to someone or something not human. He could sense the presence of communication without comprehending its content. This theme recurs: communication without comprehension, waiting without action, presence without body. The Atlas machines seem to embody liminality, suspended between categories. For intelligence analysts trained in clarity, this ambiguity was frustrating, but for those who look beyond, it is precisely this ambiguity that gives the visions their power. The sessions also reveal something else: fear. More than one viewer reacted with unease, even dread. Not because the machines threatened, but because their scale defied comprehension. One subject wrote afterward, "Too vast, too silent. The silence is unbearable." Another confessed privately, "I felt as if I were inside something that was watching, but it did not care whether I existed." These reactions suggest not hostility, but indifference, a cosmic coldness that unsettled the human mind. Indifference may be more terrifying than hostility. An enemy at least acknowledges your existence. But a machine that hums for eons, waiting, holding, listening, without regard for the human who glimpses it, that is a different kind of dread. It evokes the silence of the cosmos itself, vast and unresponsive, yet filled with rhythms beyond comprehension. In the end, the vision of machines does not resolve into clarity. It remains a fragment, a sketch, a hum without sound. But the persistence of this motif suggests it is not random. Whether drawn from cosmic signals, subconscious archetypes, or glimpses of something real, the machines of Atlas continue to hum in the imagination. One transcript ends with a line that captures the essence: "They are not ours. They were never ours. They wait still. Nothing more is written." The session ended, the file closed, but the hum lingers, and it is that lingering resonance that carries us forward into the older echoes that Atlas seems to stir. For these machines are not merely technological. They recall something much older, a burden carried through myth, the figure of Atlas himself, holding the heavens, standing eternal as cosmic sentinel. When the remote viewers spoke of towers that vibrated, of machines that seemed alive yet not alive, the analyst heard echoes they could not name. To them, the words were anomalies in transcripts. To others, they were reminders of something older, something that had existed long before intelligence programs or Cold War paranoia, the figure of Atlas, standing at the edge of the world, burdened with the weight of the sky. In Greek myth, Atlas was a titan defeated in the war against the Olympian gods. As punishment, Zeus condemned him not to chains or fire, but to a task, an eternal one. He would hold the heavens upon his shoulders, never to rest, never to kneel. He became not only a prisoner, but a cosmic pillar, a living instrument that separated earth from sky. The ancient poets describe him standing at the western edge of the world, beyond the known seas, his body strained but unbroken, bearing a burden too vast for comprehension. It is not difficult to see why the name Atlas might have been chosen for a project involving visions of unimaginable structures. The Titan's role was to support, to hold, to endure, a resonance with the remote viewer's repeated words. It waits, it holds, it listens. Just as Atlas was a presence without choice, a living machine of myth, so too the vision spoke of instruments that waited without end, holding some unseen order in place. The motif of the world-bearer is not unique to Greece. In Hindu cosmology, the world rests on the back of great elephants, themselves standing upon a vast turtle swimming through cosmic waters. In Norse myth, the giant Ymir's body was dismembered to create the sky and earth, his skull forming the dome above, his bones the mountains, his flesh the soil. In each case, the cosmos is sustained by a burden, a structure, a body forced into eternal function. The Atlas of the Greeks is one name for a figure that appears across cultures, the one who carries, who holds, who sustains. To To ancient minds, these myths explained what could not be explained otherwise. Why the heavens did not fall, why the earth did not collapse. To modern readers, they feel like metaphors, poetic answers to cosmic mysteries. Yet when placed beside the visions of remote viewers, machines humming, towers waiting, structures holding, it becomes difficult not to sense an echo. Did the viewers glimpse something that ancient storytellers had already intuited? Or did the storytellers leave an imprint so deep that it resurfaced in the visions of the 20th century? One fragment from Hesiod describes Atlas as enduring under strong constraint, holding up the broad heaven with unwearying head and arms. The image is striking, not just strength, but endurance, unending strain, eternal watch. The remote viewers, in their own way, seem to echo this sense of endurance. They spoke of structures that had no origin, no apparent function, but which simply persisted. They were not active in the sense of machines with engines. They existed in a state of eternal waiting, eternal resonance. Like Atlas, they endured. The resonance deepens when one considers the location. In Greek geography, Atlas stood at the western edge of the world beyond the sea, where the sun descended each night. To the Greeks, this was the horizon of knowledge, the place where maps ended. Beyond lay Oceanus, the endless. And it was there that Atlas bore his burden, on the frontier between known and unknown. Remote viewers, too, spoke of landscapes beyond Earth, horizons too vast for terrestrial eyes. Their visions placed Atlas not at the edge of a sea, but at the edge of the cosmos itself. In both cases, Atlas stands where knowledge falters. Even the sense of being observed, which haunted the sessions, finds its mythic counterpart. In some traditions, Atlas was not only burdened but watchful, a guardian at the boundary. Later traditions linked him to astronomy, portraying him as the father of the Pleiades, the one who knew the heavens because he carried them. In Roman times, depictions of Atlas show him holding a celestial globe, covered in constellations. To carry the sky was to know it. To be Atlas was to be the watcher of stars. The remote viewer's feeling of being watched by the structures resonates eerily with this myth. The bearer is also the observer, the weight is also the gaze. There is another layer. Myths are not static. They are echoes themselves, reshaped over centuries. Some scholars argue that the story of Atlas may preserve older memories from cultures predating Greece, echoes of Near Eastern myths of cosmic pillars, or even memories of megalithic monuments. The idea that myth encodes ancient memory has long been debated. What matters here is not proof, but resonance. If myths themselves are echoes of forgotten visions, then the Atlas sessions may be part of a longer cycle. Visions feeding myths, myths shaping visions, each reflecting the other across time. Consider also the visual resemblance. The Greek Atlas was often depicted as a man bent beneath a massive globe, his body straining but upright. The remote viewers, when sketching their towers, drew vertical forms supporting something unseen, vibrating with unseen weight. Both images are pillars of endurance. Both suggest a burden too vast for explanation. Both transform the unseen into structure. The question lingers. Are the echoes coincidence, archetype, or something more? Some argue that human imagination naturally gravitates to certain motifs, pillars, burdens, watchers, because they reflect deep psychological needs. Others suggest a more literal interpretation, that myths preserve distant memories of real encounters with cosmic structures, memories that resurface in altered states. Either way, the echo between myth and vision cannot be denied. One viewer, after a session, wrote in a private note, "It feels like I'm standing where gods once stood. Not a place for humans. The note was never meant for official record. It was a margin thought, a confession. But it captures the essence of these echoes. The visions do not merely describe machines. They invoke the sense of trespass, of entering a realm that belongs to something greater, older, enduring. Just as myth places Atlas at the boundary, so too the visions place the viewer at a threshold not meant to be crossed. What makes the echo uncanny is its persistence. Myths, thousands of years old, speak of burdens and watchers. Remote viewers decades ago spoke of machines that wait and watch. Modern astronomy, in its own way, describes cosmic structures, filaments, webs, pulsars, that stretch across space with a kind of mechanical regularity. Different languages, different epochs, yet all circling the same motif: vastness sustained, vastness observed, vastness endured, and so the atlas of myth leans over the atlas of transcripts, their shadows overlapping. One holds the heavens in punishment, the other hums in silence, waiting. Both are immovable, eternal presences at the threshold of human comprehension. As the echoes accumulate, one question rises like a faint note in the hum. If these myths are not only stories but reflections of something glimpsed, then what burden are we standing beneath now, unaware? The answer is not given. Instead, the echo carries us forward, to the next fragment in the chain, where myth meets not only vision but map, where sketches of the unearthly begin to align with charts that have no origin. Amid the folders and transcripts of Atlas, there exists a fragment that unsettled even the most pragmatic analysts, a map that corresponded to no place on Earth. It was not elaborate, just a series of lines, curves and marks drawn by a remote viewer during a session. Yet when placed beside other sketches made months apart by different subjects, the resemblance was undeniable. Each showed a flat plane interrupted by vertical forms, each bisected by lines suggesting orientation, and each marked with clusters of circles that looked less like cities and more like stars. To intelligence officers, maps were sacred tools. They grounded abstraction into coordinates, turned rumours into targets. But this map was different. It refused grounding. The lines did not match terrestrial geography. The curves did not echo rivers or coastlines. The circles did not align with known towns or installations. One analyst, frustrated, scrawled across the margin, "Not Earth. Discard." And yet the sheet was not discarded. It was kept, labelled, filed under the Atlas designation, as though even in its uselessness it hinted at something too strange to throw away. The most unsettling element was the recurrence of numbers. Several viewers, unconnected to one another, produced strings of digits that matched across sessions. They were not latitude or longitude, not any recognisable Earth-based grid. But when plotted decades later by independent researchers, they formed rough alignments with regions of the sky catalogued by astronomers, regions near Lyra, Cygnus, Hercules. At the time of the sessions, these constellations held nothing remarkable, but their recurrence in maps without origin suggested intentionality, or at least a consistency that belied randomness. The sketches themselves seemed simple, yet they carried detail that defied dismissal. One shows a flat horizon, two vertical towers rising, a line stretching outward as if marking direction. Another includes concentric circles radiating from a central point, annotated with the word resonance. A third resembles a chart of currents, arrows drawn between circles as though energy flowed from one to another. Analysts, unwilling to entertain the unearthly, described them as symbolic overlays, but the viewers insisted they were not symbols, they were maps. The notion of maps without origin carries deep resonance in human history. Ancient cultures left behind charts that puzzled later generations. The Piri-Reis map of 1513, drawn on gazelle skin, depicts coastlines of South America and Antarctica centuries before they were officially mapped. The Nebra sky disk, unearthed in Germany, shows a Bronze Age chart of stars, the oldest known map of the heavens. The Dunhuang Star Atlas, hidden in a cave along the Silk Road, captures the sky with a precision unmatched until modern astronomy. Each of these emerge from a context where explanation falters. Who charted what they could not see? How did they know what was beyond their horizon? The Atlas map feels like an echo of these artifacts, a chart not of known terrain but of something glimpsed in vision. Like the sky disk, it places stars alongside symbols. Like the Piri-Reis map, it presents coastlines without origin. Like the Dunhuang scrolls, it offers a cosmos on fragile paper, yet here the context is stranger still, a vision induced in silence, recorded not by observation, but by the mind's unanchored eye. The persistence of certain shapes within the Atlas sketches suggests more than imagination. The vertical lines, for example, always appear in pairs or groups, rarely alone. They stand as markers, as though to indicate orientation or gateway. The concentric circles repeat across sessions, hinting at cycles or pulses. The arrows suggest flow, perhaps of energy or direction. To dismiss them as doodles is to ignore the stubborn consistency. Some have wondered whether the maps correspond not to geography, but to structure, cosmic rather than terrestrial. In modern cosmology, astronomers speak of the cosmic web, filaments of galaxies stretching across unimaginable distances, forming nodes and voids like a vast lattice. When Atlas sketches are compared to diagrams of galactic filaments, the resemblance is unsettling. Lines connecting nodes, circles marking clusters, flows of unseen matter. Could the remote viewers, in some altered state, have tapped into patterns that science would only later describe? Or is the resemblance coincidence, a projection of meaning onto chaos? The possibility of correspondence grows when one considers the later discovery of interstellar visitors. In 2017, astronomers identified Oumuamua, the first known object from beyond the solar system, its path traced through the constellation Lyra, the very region marked in Atlas coordinates. At the time of the remote viewing sessions, no such objects had ever been observed, yet the maps pointed outward, toward a direction that would only later gain cosmic significance. Skeptics argue that the human mind, when pressed to imagine the unknown, produces archetypal shapes, lines, circles, flows that can be interpreted in infinite ways. Perhaps the Atlas maps are nothing more than such archetypes, given weight by hindsight. But even skeptics admit that the persistence of numbers, the repeated orientation towards specific regions of the sky, complicates the dismissal. Randomness rarely repeats with such precision. The map without origin raises another question. Origin for whom? To the viewers, the maps felt external, not imagined. They described them as places, not symbols. One viewer, after sketching circles with radiating lines, wrote, "This is not me, this is there." Another insisted, "It feels old, very old, older than us." These words suggest not invention but discovery, as though the map had been waiting, inscribed in some layer of reality accessible only through altered perception. The ancient myths again whisper in parallel. In many traditions, maps were not only guides but sacred objects connecting the human to the divine. The Aboriginal songlines of Australia chart both landscape and cosmology, paths walked by ancestral beings. The Polynesian stick charts of the Marshall Islands map ocean swells and currents invisible to the eye, passed down through memory and ritual. The Atlas sketches, in their own way, resemble such sacred maps, records of unseen forces, guides through landscapes that may not belong to Earth. If they are maps, then they are maps of absence, maps that point not to places we know, but to places we cannot yet confirm. They chart horizons beyond our instruments, yet inscribed by human hands in moments of vision. They remind us that maps do not only describe, they also invite. They open the possibility of travel, of direction, of arrival. And so the Atlas file holds not only visions of machines and burdens, but also a chart, a fragile, inexplicable map that refuses origin. To some, it is a curiosity, meaningless lines on paper. To others, it is a key, pointing outward toward regions of space that await confirmation. At the end of one folder, an anonymous hand added a final note in pencil, retained for comparison with stellar data. No further explanation, just the quiet acknowledgement that even within the rigid corridors of intelligence, someone saw in the map a possibility worth preserving. And that preservation leads us forward. For in 2017, the sky itself would provide something new, an object from beyond, a messenger from the interstellar dark, whose trajectory crossed the very region marked in the forgotten coordinates of Atlas. In October 2017, telescopes in Hawaii detected something unprecedented. A thin streak of light, faint, fast, moving on a path no comet or asteroid had ever taken. At first, it seemed like another minor rock among the countless that drift through the solar system, but the calculations quickly revealed otherwise. This object was not bound to the sun. Its orbit was hyperbolic, a curve that would never close, a trajectory that entered from interstellar space and would soon vanish back into it. It was named Oumuamua, a Hawaiian word meaning scout, or messenger from afar. Officially, astronomers designated it 1I 2017 U1. The first known interstellar object. Its path traced back through the constellation Lyra, the very region where the Atlas coordinates had pointed decades earlier. The coincidence was striking. For years, the Atlas map had been dismissed as meaningless. Now, a real object, from outside the solar system arrived along that same corridor of sky, Oumuamua defied expectations. Unlike comets, it left no trail of gas or dust. Unlike asteroids, it reflected sunlight in unusual ways. Its brightness fluctuated dramatically, suggesting a shape long and thin, perhaps cigar-like, perhaps flat and pancake-like. No one could agree. The estimates range from hundreds of meters to a kilometer in length, yet no telescope could capture more than a dot of light. By the time the world noticed, it was already racing away, accelerating in a manner that puzzled even seasoned astronomers. Some argued the acceleration was caused by outgassing, jets of vapor invisible at such distance, but no gas was detected, no dust observed. The explanation remained unsatisfying. The Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb went further, suggesting in a series of papers and interviews that Oumuamua might be artificial, a relic of alien technology, perhaps a light sail pushed by starlight, or a probe drifting between stars. His proposal was controversial, dismissed by many as speculative, yet it captured the imagination of the public. For once, the scientific community itself entertained the possibility, however reluctantly, of something beyond natural explanation. For those who had studied the Atlas files, the parallels were uncanny. Decades earlier, remote viewers had spoken of structures that hummed, machines that waited, instruments that were not alive but aware. Now an object entered the solar system, silent, indifferent. Its form unlike anything seen before, its motion unexplained. The resonance was impossible to ignore. Some whispered that Oumuamua was the very thing Atlas had glimpsed. Not metaphor, not myth, but matter crossing into our sky. Skeptics countered that this was hindsight projection. Atlas visions were vague, symbolic. Oumuamua was real, measurable, astronomical. To link them was to weave conspiracy from coincidence. And yet, the coincidences multiplied. The Atlas coordinates pointing toward Lyra, the sketches of elongated forms, the repeated words, "It waits, it listens." And now, a messenger from beyond, passing silently through that very region. The strangeness of Oumuamua deepened the more it was studied. Its surface appeared unusually reflective, more so than typical asteroids. Its spin suggested a tumbling motion, chaotic yet stable, as though it had been shaped by forces unlike those of our solar system. Its lack of debris trail contradicted every model of cometary behavior, and the unexplained acceleration, subtle but undeniable, left scientists uneasy. The cosmos rarely grants anomalies this sharp, this resistant to ordinary explanation. As telescopes tracked it, one fact became clear. It was leaving too quickly. By the time proposals were made to send probes or redirect telescopes, it was already beyond reach. Humanity's first interstellar visitor would remain forever a mystery, a dot of light receding into darkness. The loss was palpable. Astronomers spoke of regret, of having glimpsed history and let it slip away. For those who studied the Atlas visions, the loss felt familiar. Once again, something immense had appeared, been briefly seen, and vanished without resolution. But the resonance between vision and object remained. In ancient times, comets were seen as omens, messengers carrying meaning beyond their material form. The arrival of Oumuamua revived this sense of omen. It was not merely a rock, it was the first confirmed traveller from beyond. It carried with it the vastness of interstellar space, the silence of billions of years, the possibility of origins unknown. To call it a messenger was more than poetic. It was recognition that its arrival had changed something in human imagination. The connection to Atlas lies not in proof, but in echo. The remote viewers had described machines that waited, structures that listened. Oumuamua was silent, yet it seemed to embody waiting, listening, passing without explanation. The maps had pointed toward Lyra. The object had come from Lyra. The vision spoke of resonance. The object hummed in its own way, a hum of trajectory and reflection, inscrutable yet undeniable. Even the debate within science mirrored the tension of Atlas. Analysts in the Cold War struggled to reconcile visionary descriptions with pragmatic intelligence. Astronomers in 2017 struggled to reconcile anomalous data with known models. In both cases, the tension lay between what was seen and what could be explained. In both cases, the records ended not with answers but with lingering unease, The Atlas files spoke of machines that were not for us. The viewer whispered that the message was directed elsewhere. Oumuamua too passed through without pausing, as though its presence was not meant for Earth, not meant for human eyes. It was indifferent to us, a messenger perhaps carrying nothing, perhaps carrying everything, but in either case not addressing us. And yet, by its mere arrival, it forced us to look outward, to imagine beyond. The parallel grows sharper when one considers timing. The Atlas sessions took place in an era when humanity was just beginning to send probes to other planets, when the dream of interstellar travel was distant. Oumuamua arrived at a moment when humanity was finally listening to the sky with unprecedented instruments, ready to receive anomalies. It was as if the vision and the reality were separated by decades, yet converged in meaning. The lingering question remains: was Oumuamua a natural body, a shard of rock flung from another star, or was it something more deliberate, an artifact of intelligence beyond Earth? Science leans toward natural explanation, but with unease, with caveats, with acknowledgements of gaps. The Atlas visions lean toward the unearthly, yet without proof, only fragments. Between them lies a space of possibility, wide enough to keep the hum alive. Oumuamua has long since departed, fading into the outer dark, unreachable, but its trail remains, not of dust, but of questions. And in that trail, Atlas whispers again, a map without origin, a machine that waits, a messenger that passes without pause. The echoes overlap as though vision and object are two sides of a pattern too vast to see in full. And as Oumuamua vanished, astronomers began to wonder aloud. Would there be another? Would another messenger come? One that we might catch in time, one that we might finally meet not as a dot of light but as a presence. The sky, once indifferent, now seemed alive with possibility. And in that possibility lies the bridge to the next silence, the next gap, not in vision, but in data itself. When Oumuamua appeared in 2017, it was already leaving. By the time astronomers recognized what it was, a visitor from beyond the solar system, it had passed closest to Earth and was speeding away, slipping past the orbit of Jupiter with astonishing velocity. The telescopes turned as quickly as they could, but they were chasing a vanishing trail. What remained were fragments, shifts of brightness, curves of trajectory, faint echoes of light on polished surfaces. From these scraps, entire models were built, but the core was missing. Humanity's first recorded interstellar object arrived and departed before we had the instruments ready to receive it. This gap was more than technical, it was existential. For decades, science had dreamed of meeting something from beyond, a comet from another star, a messenger from the deep. When the dream finally materialized, it was already gone. The loss was palpable. Astronomers compared it to standing on a shore, seeing a ship on the horizon, but with no way to call it back, no way to know its passengers. A silhouette, and nothing more. The absence of data left room for everything else. Speculation, imagination, fear, wonder. Scientific papers proposed natural explanations, outgassing, rotation, radiation pressure, yet each left holes. No outgassing was observed, no dust detected, no model fit the acceleration perfectly. In those gaps, Avi Loeb and others suggested the unthinkable. Perhaps Oumuamua was artificial, a fragment of alien technology, a drifting probe, a piece of a larger design. The idea was provocative, controversial, and in some ways necessary. Where the data ends, the mind continues. The Atlas files tell the same story. Remote viewers described landscapes not of Earth, towers vibrating, machines that listened. Yet the records are fragments, sketches on fragile paper, numbers without context, phrases that end abruptly. The sessions often terminated in silence, viewers refusing to continue, monitors scribbling notes in haste. The visions, like Oumuamua, passed too quickly, leaving only impressions. The analysts were left with absence. No coordinates that matched Earth, no photographs, no confirmation, just a gap filled with resonance. In both cases, the data gap is what drives the mystery. If Oumuamua had been imaged clearly, with high-resolution photographs revealing a lump of rock, the speculation would have ended. If the Atlas sessions had produced exact, verifiable coordinates on Earth, the mythic aura would have vanished. But instead, both left traces without closure. a sketch without origin, an object without photograph. The unknown persisted precisely because the evidence was incomplete. The silence of data has always been fertile ground for imagination. In 1977, the WOW signal, a sudden unexplained burst detected by a radio telescope in Ohio, lasted only 72 seconds. No repeat was ever found. The data gap was total. No recording, no confirmation, just a string of numbers and the word WOW, scrawled by the astonished astronomer. For decades, it has remained a symbol of possibility, alive only because it was never resolved. The same is true of Oumuamua. The same is true of Atlas. Science thrives on repetition, on patterns that can be tested again and again. But the cosmos does not always comply. Sometimes it offers only a glimpse, a single event that does not return. The human response to such glimpses is divided. Some retreat to caution. It was anomaly, noise, coincidence. Others step forward. It was message, contact, revelation. Between them lies the uneasy ground where mystery survives. The Atlas viewers, when confronted with their own fragments, often expressed frustration. One wrote after a session, "I can see, but not clearly. It fades before I understand." Another, "Like standing in fog. Shapes appear, then vanish." These words mirror the astronomer's laments about Oumuamua, too faint, too fast, gone before we could focus. Both experiences are marked not by what was seen, but by what was missed. Even in the absence of data, patterns emerge. The Atlas coordinates aligned with Lyra. Oumuamua came from Lyra. The viewer spoke of waiting, listening machines. Oumuamua accelerated as though pushed by unseen force. These parallels may be coincidence, or they may be resonance across different modes of perception, visionary and scientific, each touching the same unknown from different angles, each incomplete. The danger lies in filling the gap too eagerly. History is full of examples where absence of data bred myths that later dissolved under evidence. Strange lights became planets. Omens became comets. Gods became stars. Yet history also holds moments where myth anticipated discovery. The existence of Troy, once dismissed as legend, revealed by excavation. The presence of deep ocean trenches whispered in folklore, confirmed by sonar. The line between false projection and prescient vision is thin, and the only judge is time. The data gap also raises questions about readiness. If another Oumuamua arrives, and astronomers predict it will, for spaces filled with wandering interstellar bodies, will we be prepared? Will telescopes capture it in time, probes be launched, signals detected, or will it too slip past, leaving another trace of absence? The same question haunts Atlas. If visions are glimpses of something real, will we ever learn to focus them, to extract clarity from fog? Or will they remain forever fragments, tantalizing but incomplete? The gap itself becomes a presence. Silence is not nothing. It is its own kind of signal. The absence of data draws the mind into speculation, imagination, interpretation. In both science and vision, the unknown exerts gravity. The less we know, the more we feel. The Atlas sessions felt heavy, burdened with immensity. Oumuamua felt uncanny, burdened with silence. Both carry weight not from what they revealed, but from what they withheld. One analyst writing in the margins of an Atlas file captured this paradox with stark simplicity. Absence is the anomaly. It is a haunting phrase. Absence itself, the missing detail, the lost image, the silence, becomes the mystery. The viewer stops speaking, the telescope stops tracking. The gap becomes more telling than any data could, and in that gap lies the thread that pulls us onward. If the fragments resist closure, if the silence persists, then the only option is to search further, to push instruments, to open minds, to listen more closely. For within the gaps something hums, faint but unyielding. The hum leads us next not to vision or rock, but to the mind itself. To the question of how the brain perceives, how consciousness might extend beyond the body, how science itself approaches the frontier of perception. For if the gap cannot yet be closed by instruments, perhaps it can be traced in the rhythms of the mind that glimpses it. When we speak of remote viewing, of visions beyond space and time, we are speaking not only of mystery but of the human brain itself. The mind is the instrument, the receiver, the screen on which images appear. And if Atlas was glimpsed through such vision, then the path toward understanding lies partly in the study of that instrument, the science of perception, the pulse of the brain in altered states. Modern neuroscience has shown that the brain is never still. Even at rest, it hums with rhythms, waves of electrical activity sweeping across its surface. Alpha waves, slow and steady, mark states of relaxed awareness. Theta waves, deeper and more irregular, emerge in dreamlike states and meditative trances. Delta waves sink further still into sleep. And in the faster ranges, beta and gamma waves, the brain sharpens into focus, analysis, attention. These pulses form the silent music of thought. Remote viewers, when studied under clinical conditions, often showed heightened theta activity, the same frequency associated with deep meditation and hypnagogic states. This suggests that remote viewing may not be a supernatural gift, but a shift into a neurological rhythm where the mind opens to imagery usually hidden beneath waking thought. It is a state familiar to mystics and shamans, to monks in meditation, to artists lost in vision. The difference lies not in the waves themselves, but in the interpretation given to what arises within them. Scientists studying such states sometimes describe the brain as a filter, not a generator. The metaphor suggests that consciousness may extend beyond the brain, and the brain's role is to narrow it, to tune it, much like a radio receiver selects one frequency from a spectrum of signals. In this view, altered states loosen the filter, allowing impressions from elsewhere, whether imagination, subconscious, or something more, to slip through. The Atlas sessions, then, might represent not inventions of the mind, but receptions through a loosened filter. Quantum theory, too, has been invoked as a metaphor for such perception. Entanglement, the strange phenomenon where two particles remain connected across distance, suggests a universe where information does not always obey ordinary limits. Some theorists speculate that consciousness itself might exploit such connections, reaching across space and time in ways we do not yet understand. The idea is speculative, controversial, often dismissed by physicists. Yet it persists, because it offers a language for what feels otherwise inexplicable. Remote viewers spoke of knowing without seeing, of impressions that arrived whole, without steps. Entanglement, whether literal or metaphorical, provides a frame. Even within mainstream science, anomalies remain. Studies on precognition, on subtle influences of intention, on correlations between minds at distance, continue to produce results that hover at the edge of statistical significance. Never decisive, never fully replicable, yet never vanishing. It is as if reality itself resists closing the case, leaving the door slightly ajar, enough to keep curiosity alive. The pulse of remote science beats faintly, steady but elusive. The Atlas visions sit at the crossroads of this inquiry. On one hand, they can be dismissed as products of altered brain states, imaginative projections shaped by culture and expectation. On the other hand, they might be glimpses of something real, accessed through states where the filter loosens and signals pass. The brain is both the question and the tool. Its rhythms shape the images, but its rhythms may also be the key that allows perception to cross boundaries. Consider the sense of vibration described by multiple viewers. The hum in the chest, the resonance inside the bones. Neuroscience recognizes that sound and rhythm profoundly affect brain states. Drums, chants, and tones have been used for millennia to induce trance. Certain frequencies, played steadily, can shift brainwaves toward theta or delta, opening doors to vision. Could the hum felt by viewers have been an internal resonance, the brain's own rhythm magnified? Or could it have been the perception of an external resonance, something aligned with the mind's frequency, received like a carrier wave? The overlap with ancient practices is striking. Shamans spoke of spirit journeys accompanied by the beat of drums, monks of cosmic sounds heard in deep meditation, mystics of vibrations that carried them beyond the body. Modern neuroscience frames these as entrainment, the brain synchronizing with external rhythms. Yet the experience feels the same, a sense of resonance that carries perception outward. Atlas may be another chapter in this long tradition, reframed by the language of intelligence but rooted in the same pulse. What science cannot yet explain is the consistency of motifs. If visions are purely subjective, why do multiple viewers describe the same structures, the same hum, the same sense of being observed? Suggestion and shared culture may account for some overlap. But the persistence of specific details, the vertical towers, the resonance, the impression of waiting, suggests more. It hints at a shared field of perception, a common signal received through different minds. Some researchers have proposed that the brain, in altered states, may access information stored in the fabric of reality itself, what physicist David Bohm called the implicate order, a deeper layer of reality where all information is unfolded. In this view, remote viewing is not imagination but retrieval, like dipping a hand into an unseen river of knowledge. Again, it is speculative, but it offers a frame. The brain as receiver, the vision as data, the hum as signal. The pulse of remote science is measured not only in brainwaves, but in heartbeats, in breath, in the rhythms of the body itself. Viewers often reported physical sensations, tightness in the chest, pressure on the skin, a sense of heat or cold. These somatic impressions suggest that perception is not confined to the brain, but extends through the body as a whole. The body becomes an antenna, tuned to frequencies beyond ordinary sense. Science has barely begun to explore this territory, but the experiences are consistent. Skeptics argue that these impressions are nothing more than the brain misinterpreting internal signals. The hum in the chest is heartbeat, the vibration in the bones is muscle tension, the sense of presence is projection. These explanations are plausible, and they cannot be dismissed. Yet they do not close the question. For even if the impressions arise internally, why do they converge across individuals? Why do the same motifs surface again and again, across culture, across time? The pulse of remote science is not decisive. It does not prove Atlas, nor does it disprove it. Instead, it sketches the boundary. The brain as filter, the body as receiver, the mind as field. It shows how far science has come in measuring rhythms and how far it has yet to go in explaining meaning. It leaves us suspended, aware of the complexity of perception, but uncertain of its reach. In this suspension lies the mystery. The Atlas visions may be imagination, may be resonance, may be glimpses of something real. The brain hums, the cosmos hums, and somewhere between them, signals cross. Whether those signals are noise or message remains unknown. But the persistence of the hum, the pulse of remote science itself, suggests that the story is not yet finished, and in that unfinished pulse lies the bridge to the next fragment, the Atlas transcript itself, a document where the hum became language, where the viewer's awe and fear spilled into words that remain chilling decades later. Among the fragments scattered across the Atlas files, one stands apart. It is not remarkable for its length, for the transcript is brief. It is not remarkable for its detail, for much of the description is fragmented and halting. It is remarkable for its tone. There is a rawness, a fear, and an awe that are absent from most remote viewing records. It is a document that feels less like a session and more like a confession. The transcript begins in familiar fashion. The monitor's voice is steady, instructing the subject to relax, to describe impressions as they arise. The viewer notes the usual sensations: dark, cold, metallic surface. Then, almost abruptly, the words shift. Tall structures, vibrating. There is pressure. It is heavy here. Already the imagery aligns with earlier sessions. But then comes the line that anchors the transcript in memory. I feel watched. The monitor, careful not to lead, asks for clarification. Describe the source of the feeling. The viewer hesitates. It's not a being, not exactly. It's the place itself. The whole place is aware. The towers are not just structures. They are eyes. Silence follows. The transcript shows no response for several lines, only the monitor urging calm. The viewer continues. They look like machines, but they listen. They are listening now. The words are unsettling enough, but what follows is stranger still. There are beacons, the viewer whispers. They are sending, always sending, not to us, to others, far away. They are waiting for reply. The monitor asks, describe the nature of the signal, the response, not sound, not light. It is pressure. It moves through me. It is not meant for me, but I can feel it. At this point, the transcript becomes chaotic. The viewer's words break, interrupted by pauses and fragments. I can't. It's too much. It's inside my chest. It's everywhere. The stenographer's notes record that the subject's breathing became erratic. His pulse accelerated. The session was terminated prematurely. The final words, before silence, are scrawled in uneven handwriting on a sketch page. Beacon. Waiting. Not for us. What makes this transcript chilling is not only the words themselves, but the reaction of those who handled it. In the margin, an analyst has written, "Session terminated due to distress. Retain under Atlas classification." No interpretation, no dismissal, no attempt to explain. Just a stark acknowledgement that the material was too strange, too unsettling, and yet too important to discard. The sketch accompanying the transcript is equally haunting. It shows a tall vertical form with arcs radiating outward, circles clustered around its base, lines connecting one to another. It is crude, drawn in haste, yet it conveys a sense of pattern, something structured, deliberate, communicative. Beside it, the word beacon appears again, underlined twice. The language of beacons carries deep resonance. Beacons are signals of presence, markers of location, invitations to connection. Lighthouses guide ships, radio beacons guide planes. In myth, beacons mark sacred fires, watchtowers, pillars of light. To describe the Atlas structures as beacons suggests not isolation but communication, an active attempt to reach beyond. Yet the viewer was clear. The message was not for humanity. It was directed elsewhere. We were intruding on a signal not meant for us. This detail echoes earlier whispers in the files. Other viewers, in different sessions, had used similar language. They wait for reply. The signal is constant, not for us. The repetition suggests a theme too consistent to be coincidence. To those who believe, it implies that Atlas was glimpsed as part of a network, a system of communication stretching beyond Earth. To skeptics, it is evidence of suggestion, a shared psychological motif. Either way, the language refuses dismissal. The sense of trespass pervades the transcript. The viewer did not describe discovery but intrusion. He was not invited, he stumbled into a conversation already in progress, a signal already in motion. His words carry the weight of someone who knows they do not belong, who feels the gaze of something vast and indifferent. It is not hostility he describes, but something more unnerving, indifference. The beacons do not care who hears, because the message is not meant for us. In intelligence circles, this transcript became a point of unease. Rumours spread among the small community of remote viewers, the beacon session, the one where the subject refused to continue. Some whispered that the subject never returned to Atlas work, that he asked to be reassigned permanently. Others claimed he suffered lingering effects, dreams of pressure, visions of towers. None of this is confirmed, but the rumours themselves reveal the impact. Within a program already steeped in secrecy, this one session became legend. The scientific implications, if taken seriously, are profound. A beacon not for us suggests communication between others, civilizations beyond Earth, or structures built for purposes beyond human understanding. The idea aligns with speculations about cosmic engineering, the notion that advanced beings might leave monuments or signals across the stars. But it also aligns with natural phenomena, pulsars, quasars, cosmic signals that broadcast across eons, indifferent to who hears them. Whether artifact or nature, the impression is the same, something immense sending across silence. The mythic implications are equally powerful. In many traditions, the cosmos itself is described as a beacon, a voice that sings creation into being. The Om of Hindu cosmology, the Logos of Greek philosophy, the Word of Genesis, all describe sound or signal as the foundation of reality. To glimpse a beacon humming across space is to echo this mythic truth. That existence itself may be vibration, resonance, communication. The Atlas transcript, then, may not only describe a machine, it may describe a symbol, the cosmos as a message, endlessly repeated, waiting for response. But symbols do not erase fear. The viewer's distress, his abrupt termination of the session, his refusal to continue, these remind us that the experience was not abstract. It was visceral, overwhelming. He felt pressure in his chest, vibration in his bones, a signal moving through him. To encounter such immensity without preparation is to confront one's own smallness, to feel oneself a trespasser in a realm too vast for comprehension. The Atlas transcript ends not with clarity but with silence. The words trail off. The session closes. The file is marked and stored. The beacon continues perhaps in vision or in reality, sending to others, waiting for reply. But for us, only fragments remain. It is in these fragments that the resonance grows. Just as Oumuamua slipped past before we could see clearly, just as the wow signal flared once and never again, so too the Atlas transcript offers a glimpse without continuation, a hum without resolution, a beacon not for us yet overheard in passing. And in the silence that follows, one is left with the unsettling possibility. If we can overhear signals not meant for us, how often have we already done so without recognizing it? How many hums have passed through us unnoticed? How many beacons sending endlessly across the cosmos, indifferent to whether we listen? The transcript does not answer. It only leaves us with a final image, a sketch of a tower, arcs radiating outward, the word beacon underlined, a machine that waits, a signal that continues, a message not for us. And from this silence arises the next question. If beacons exist, sending endlessly into the dark, have we already intercepted their signal, not in vision, but in the static of our instruments, hidden among the noise of the stars? If the Atlas transcript spoke of beacons sending endlessly into silence, then the natural question follows, have we ever caught such signals with our machines, hidden among the noise of the stars? The history of radio astronomy is filled with anomalies, whispers from space that flare once and vanish, leaving behind only confusion. To most scientists, these are errors, interference, misreadings. But to those who recall Atlas, they look like fragments of the same message, caught not by vision but by instrument. The most famous of these anomalies is the WOW signal. On August 15, 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope in Ohio detected a sudden, powerful burst from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. It lasted for 72 seconds, exactly the window in which the telescope's design could track a point in the sky. The burst was so strong, so clear, that astronomer Jerry Eman circled the numbers on the printout and wrote, "Wow," in the margin. No signal like it has ever been recorded again. No natural explanation has sufficed. No artificial source has been confirmed. It is a single moment suspended forever in mystery. The wow signal is not alone. Over the decades, radio telescopes have picked up countless bursts, spikes, and flares that resist explanation. Most are quickly discarded. Satellite interference, Earth-based noise, the static of our own machines. But a few linger. In the early 2000s, a series of fast, bright radio bursts were detected, each lasting milliseconds, each arriving from deep space. They became known as fast radio bursts, or FRBs. For years, scientists debated whether they were instrumental glitches or cosmic phenomena. Then, as more were recorded, they became undeniable. Their origin remains uncertain. Neutron stars, magnetars, or something more exotic. What matters is the echo. They are bursts like beacons, flaring into silence, then gone. To connect Atlas to these anomalies is speculative, but the parallels are striking. The remote viewers spoke of vibrations felt in the chest, signals moving through them, pressure that was not sound or light but something else. Radio astronomers, too, describe bursts that are not continuous waves but sudden flares, pulses that feel more like messages than like noise. In both cases, the impression is not of steady background hum, but of something deliberate, something that arrives, interrupts, and departs. There are other cases, less known but equally haunting. In 1998, astronomers in Australia began recording mysterious radio signals they called peritons. At first, they seemed cosmic, bursts of energy lasting fractions of a second. But after years of confusion, the source was identified. Microwave ovens on the observatory grounds, opened prematurely before the cycle ended. A mundane explanation, almost comic in its banality, and yet the peritons reveal the fragility of the search, the ease with which noise can masquerade as signal, the difficulty of separating the cosmos from ourselves. The Atlas visions face the same challenge. How to know if the hum is external or internal, signal or imagination. What makes the anomalies compelling is not their frequency, but their singularity. The wow signal happened once. Many FRBs flare once and never repeat. Even the repeating bursts, when traced, shift unpredictably, resisting regularity. It is as if the cosmos speaks in fragments, whispers that refuse continuity. The Atlas sessions mirror this pattern. Visions that begin vividly, then collapse into silence. Impressions that overwhelm, then vanish. Both seem marked by incompletion, as though whatever is glimpsed cannot be held for long. Some researchers have proposed that if extraterrestrial intelligence wished to signal across stars, it might use bursts rather than continuous waves. Short, powerful flares that stand out against background noise, yet require little energy compared to endless transmission. Beacons, in other words, designed to be noticed once, enough to prove existence, without demanding dialogue. The Atlas viewers, in their way, describe the same. Beacons that send, waiting not for us, but for others. To glimpse or overhear them once may be all that is permitted, and yet, science is cautious. Every anomaly is tested, modelled, dissected. The WOW signal might have been a terrestrial reflection. FRBs may be collapsing stars. Strange accelerations may be natural physics not yet understood. The caution is warranted. Imagination too easily fills gaps. But caution also leaves room for silence. The anomalies remain unexplained, filed away like Atlas itself, labelled but unresolved. There is a deeper resonance here between human perception and cosmic data. Both remote viewers and radio telescopes operate on thresholds, on faint signals barely above noise. Both are vulnerable to interference, to projection, to error. And yet both sometimes capture something that resists dismissal, something too sharp to ignore. The boundary between noise and signal is thin, and across that boundary lies mystery. Consider again the WOW signal. Its numbers, circled in red, resemble the Atlas sketches, marks on paper that outlast the event, fragile yet enduring. Both survive as traces, not as events themselves. We do not hear the hum, we see the record of it. We do not feel the pressure, we read the words of someone who did. The record becomes the only reality, and the mystery persists because the record refuses to resolve. Some within the Atlas program speculated privately that the beacons described in visions might correspond to such anomalies, that the remote viewers were perceiving what radio telescopes had also glimpsed, but through a different medium. If so, then the silence is not absence, but overlap. Two different instruments, human and mechanical, catching the same signal in different forms. It is an alluring idea, though impossible to prove. Yet the allure lies not in proof, but in resonance, the sense that vision and science might be touching the same unknown from different sides. The signal in the noise is not only a technical problem, it is a metaphor for existence itself. Life, thought, civilization, all are signals flickering against the vast background of silence. To search for others is to search for resonance, for another flicker in the dark. The Atlas viewers felt that resonance directly within their bodies. Radio astronomers detect it faintly, across light years. Both searches converge on the same question: how to distinguish noise from message, accident from intent, and perhaps that question is itself the point. Perhaps the cosmos does not speak in clarity, but in fragments. Perhaps the signal is always hidden in noise, requiring interpretation, imagination, humility. The Atlas visions, the WOW signal, the FRBs, all remind us that mystery survives not because it hides, but because it appears briefly, enough to provoke, then withdraws. The withdrawal is essential. It forces us to listen more carefully, to question more deeply, to live within completion. The Atlas transcript ended with the word beacon. The WOW signal ended with wow. Both are exclamations of recognition, astonishment without explanation. Both are traces of something larger, glimpsed but not grasped. And both lead us forward into the weight of symbol, the sense that these beacons are not only physical, not only signals, but burdens carried across myth and science alike. And so we move from the signal in the noise to the burden itself, to the figure of Atlas once more standing beneath the sky, holding what cannot be released, embodying the cosmic weight that we glimpse but cannot carry. The image of Atlas bent beneath the heavens is one of the oldest and most enduring in myth. It is not merely a tale of punishment, it is a story of weight, of burden beyond comprehension. To carry the sky is to embody endurance itself, to become not a man but a pillar. In the fragments of remote viewing and in the anomalies of science, this same image returns, not as a mythic figure, but as structures, machines, and signals that seem to hold something vast in place. What then is the burden? In myth, it was the vault of the heavens, the dome of stars pressing downward upon the Titan's shoulders. In modern science, the heavens are not a dome but a web. Galaxies strung across filaments of dark matter, clusters bound by gravity, voids yawning between them. To hold such a structure is not the work of a single being, yet the metaphor lingers. The cosmos itself seems suspended, borne by invisible pillars. Dark matter, unseen and undetectable, except through its pull, is the hidden weight. It is Atlas without form, carrying silently, eternally. Black holes deepen the resonance. They are burdens incarnate, masses so dense that nothing escapes, not even light. To approach them is to feel the weight of infinity compressed into a point, and yet they are not mere prisons. They shape galaxies, anchor their spirals, dictate the dance of stars. They are both burden and structure, both collapse and creation. In this sense, they are cosmic atlases, bearing not the heavens upon shoulders, but the fabric of reality itself upon singularities. The Atlas visions, with their vibrating towers and humming presence, echo this paradox. They are machines that do not move, beacons that do not speak, instruments that do not act, yet by their very existence they hold. They endure, they wait. Like black holes, they seem indifferent, patient, eternal. They embody burden not in action, but in presence. Ancient cultures often imagined the world supported by pillars. In Norse myth, the sky was held aloft by 4 dwarves at the corners of the earth. In Egyptian cosmology, the god Shu held apart the sky goddess Nut from the earth god Geb, maintaining the separation of realms. In Mesoamerican stories, the Bacab's 4 brothers stood at the cardinal points supporting the heavens. These myths echo the same intuition, that the cosmos is heavy, that it must be carried, that without its bearers it would collapse. The Atlas machine is a modern reflection of this intuition. The viewers described structures that seemed to bear weight, to hold resonance, to endure without purpose we could grasp. They felt the burden physically, pressure in the chest, heaviness in the bones. Their language suggests not mere observation, but participation, as though to glimpse the burden was to feel it. The machine did not simply exist, it pressed upon those who saw it. The cosmic burden is contagious. Science, too, grapples with weight. Gravity is the fundamental force that shapes the universe, yet its true nature remains elusive. Einstein described it not as force but as curvature, the bending of space-time around mass. To live within gravity is to live within burden, the pull of Earth, the constraint of orbit, the inevitability of fall. Remote viewers described resonance as pressure, as weight upon the body. Perhaps their language unconsciously echoed this truth, that to exist at all is to bear weight, to be pressed upon by the fabric of reality. And yet, burden is not only oppressive, it is also structuring. Without gravity, there would be no stars, no planets, no galaxies. Without Atlas, the heavens would fall into chaos. Without the machines, the viewers felt, there would be silence instead of resonance. Burden gives form, weight gives shape. The cosmic burden, unbearable though it seems, is the condition of order. The mythology of Atlas also contains an overlooked nuance. In some traditions, Atlas is not merely punished but necessary. His task, though imposed, is indispensable. Without him, heaven and earth would collapse together. This transforms his role from prisoner to pillar, from victim to foundation. The Atlas machines, too, may be less ominous than they appear. Their waiting, their holding, their listening may not be threats, but functions, silent guarantors of order, carrying burdens we cannot see. The indifference described by viewers, the sense that the machines did not care for human presence, may reflect this functional necessity. They are not hostile because hostility implies choice. They are not benevolent because benevolence implies intention. They simply are. Like gravity, like black holes, like the pillars of myth, they carry without preference, without concern. Their burden is beyond morality. This is perhaps the most unsettling truth, that the cosmos may be sustained not by gods with motives, but by structures without intention. To glimpse Atlas is to glimpse function without meaning, endurance without care. It is to confront a universe that does not answer, yet continues, heavy and vast, heavy and yet humans persist in seeking meaning. The Titan Atlas became a symbol of endurance, a figure carved into statues, painted onto globes, invoked as metaphor for human struggle. We took his punishment and made it inspiration. Perhaps we do the same with the machines, with Oumuamua, with the wow signal. We take fragments that may be indifferent, meaningless, and we cast upon them meaning, seeing in them reflections of ourselves. This is our burden, to interpret, to seek, to carry the weight of meaning even when none is given. The cosmic burden, then, is double. It is the literal weight of the universe, borne by gravity, dark matter, and perhaps structures unseen. And it is the symbolic weight, borne by us, the interpreters, who cannot leave silence untouched. We feel watched, even if we are not. We hear beacons, even if they are noise. We imagine Atlas, even if the sky holds itself. One remote viewer, after describing the machines, wrote a line in the margin of his sketch. They are tired, but they cannot stop. It is a strange anthropomorphism, but also a poignant truth. To endure eternally is to become burden itself. Whether Titan, machine, or black hole, the weight does not lessen, only persists. The viewer sensed weariness where perhaps none existed, projecting human fragility onto cosmic endurance. Yet the projection reveals our deepest fear, not destruction, but endless carrying, endless silence. The cosmic burden stands as symbol and structure alike. It is myth transformed into machine, machine transformed into physics, physics transformed into awe. It is Atlas at the edge of the world, black holes at the centres of galaxies, machines humming in visions, signals flaring in telescopes. All speak the same truth. Existence is heavy, and someone, or something, must carry it. And so we return to the image of Atlas, eternal, unmoving, supporting what cannot be dropped. His figure is both punishment and necessity, both myth and metaphor. And through him we glimpse the machines of vision, the filaments of science, the burdens of silence. Yet the shadow of burden is always doubt. If the machines carry, what do they carry? If the signals wait, what do they wait for? If Atlas endures, who watches him endure? These questions linger, unresolved, leading us into the voices of skepticism, into the realm where scientists wary of myth and vision push back, demanding clarity, demanding proof. Every mystery collects shadows of belief, but just as surely it attracts the bright light of doubt. If Atlas became a whisper of cosmic burden and hidden machines, it also became an example for skeptics of how imagination outruns evidence. For every remote viewing transcript that described towers and beacons, there was a scientist or analyst who called them nothing more than dreams on paper, unanchored to reality. The history of remote viewing itself is tangled in controversy. When the CIA and the US Army revealed the existence of the Stargate project in the 1990s, the public was fascinated and divided. Some celebrated the boldness of intelligence agencies dabbling in the paranormal. Others mocked it as a costly diversion, proof of desperation in an age of Cold War fear. Scientific reviews were conducted. Panels of psychologists and statisticians examined the data. Their verdict was blunt. While some sessions appeared uncannily accurate, the overall results did not rise above chance. Remote viewing, they said, was not reliable, not repeatable, not scientific. To skeptics, Atlas was no different from countless other anomalies, a product of suggestion, expectation, and the malleability of memory. Sit someone in a room, tell them to describe what comes to mind, and they will produce images. Some will sound profound, some will sound absurd. If enough sessions are conducted, patterns will appear simply by coincidence. This is the law of large numbers, not proof of cosmic beacons. The human brain, skeptics remind us, is wired for pattern recognition. It finds meaning in randomness, shapes in clouds, faces in shadows. This tendency, known as pareidolia, explains why ancient cultures saw gods in constellations, animals in star clusters, omens in comets. The Atlas sketches, lines, circles, towers, fit the same mould. They're archetypal shapes, produced by a mind searching for order in chaos. That they resemble maps or machines is less revelation than projection. Skeptics also point to the influence of culture. The 20th century was saturated with images of towers, antennas, rockets, satellites. The hum of machines was everywhere. Power lines, transformers, radar installations. Remote viewers, consciously or unconsciously, borrowed from this cultural reservoir. Their visions were not transmissions from elsewhere, but reflections of their own era, refracted through trance. In another time they might have spoken of temples or gods. In the Cold War they spoke of machines and signals. Even Oumuamua, skeptics argue, does not escape this pattern. Its strangeness is undeniable, but to leap from anomaly to artifact is to fall into the same trap. Nature produces forms beyond our expectations. Comets without tails, asteroids with odd shapes, bursts of radio waves without known cause. To interpret these as evidence of intelligence is to mistake ignorance for contact. The Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb, with his speculation of alien probes, was praised for boldness but criticized by peers for overreaching, for letting imagination outrun the data. Science thrives on anomalies, but it demands patience. Time will produce better telescopes, better measurements, better explanations. Until then, the skeptic advises restraint. There is also the problem of secrecy. Programs like Atlas thrived in shadows, and secrecy distorts perception. Files are partial, fragments are leaked, rumors multiply. What is withheld gains aura, what is redacted gains weight. The very absence of information becomes proof of importance. Skeptics warn that this is a psychological trap. A file marked classified does not mean it hides cosmic truths. It often hides nothing more than bureaucratic noise. To build myths on fragments is to mistake gaps for messages, and yet the skeptics cannot fully close the case. For every dismissal, a trace remains. Yes, remote viewing is unreliable, but some sessions produced uncanny detail. Yes, patterns can be projected, but why do they recur across individuals who never spoke to each other? Yes, Oumuamua may be natural, but its acceleration still resists clean explanation. The skeptic dismantles but cannot erase. The mystery persists, even if only as residue. Some skeptics take a softer stance. They do not deny the strangeness, but they relocate it. The visions, they argue, reveal not the cosmos, but the mind. To describe towers humming in silence is to describe an inner landscape, a symbolic architecture built by the subconscious. The sense of being observed, the pressure in the chest, the hum in the bones, these may be metaphors for psychological states, projections of archetypes that live deep within us. The Atlas sessions, in this view, are valuable not as maps of space but as maps of the psyche. They show us how humans confront the unknown, how imagination structures awe and fear. Even here, though, a paradox arises. If the visions are archetypes, why do the same archetypes appear across cultures and centuries? Why do myths of watchers, pillars, burdens, and signals repeat? Why do ancient stories of Atlas carrying the sky resonate with modern visions of machines bearing resonance? The skeptic explains with psychology, but psychology itself cannot fully explain the persistence of motifs. The residue remains. The deeper skeptics go, the more they reveal the limits of science itself. Remote viewing may fail as experiment, but it exposes how little we understand about consciousness. Oumuamua may be natural, but it exposes how little we understand about interstellar objects. Fast radio bursts may be astrophysical, but they expose how little we understand about cosmic energy. In each case, skepticism clears away illusions, but it leaves a field of unanswered questions. It dismantles myth, but in doing so, it reveals gaps that myth alone continues to fill. This tension between skepticism and mystery is not new. It has defined the human search for meaning for millennia. When comets blazed across the sky, skeptics called them stones, believers called them omens. When volcanoes erupted, skeptics called them geology, believers called them anger of gods. Both were partly right, partly wrong. Over time, science explained much, but never all. There is always remainder, always residue, always something that escapes clarity. Atlas lives in that residue, and perhaps that is why Atlas endures, not as proof, not as disproof, but as a site of contest. Believers see in it evidence of cosmic communication. Skeptics see in it the projection of human imagination. Between them lies the unsolved, the ambiguous, the fragmentary. Atlas is not a conclusion, but a conversation, one that continues because it cannot be ended. One analyst, weary of speculation, wrote in the margin of an Atlas file, "Noise. All noise." Yet decades later, the file is still read, still discussed, still whispered. If it were only noise, would it still echo? The skeptic says yes. Humans are drawn to noise, to patterns that are not there. The believer says no. Echoes persist because they belong to something real. The truth may be both, or neither, but the persistence itself is undeniable. The deep skeptic clears the ground, dismantles illusions, insists on clarity. Yet even in that clarity, shadows remain. The dismantling does not erase the hum. It only reveals its boundaries. The skeptics silence myths, but in the silence, the resonance returns, faint but insistent. And it is in this uneasy silence that Atlas shifts again, not as vision or doubt, but as map, as cartography of a cosmos larger than we can hold. For the next fragments of Atlas do not describe towers or beacons, but structures vast enough to resemble entire clusters of galaxies, maps of filaments and flows that stretch across the universe itself. In one of the lesser-known folders of the Atlas archive, the sketches shift in scale. Gone are the single towers, the metallic planes, the beacons radiating arcs. In their place appear webs, lattices, sweeping lines that stretch across entire pages. One viewer described it as currents, another as threads connecting points of light. A third drew circles linked by branching lines, noting in the margin, not stars, but clusters of something larger. The impression was no longer of place, but of pattern, something vast, mapped not as terrain but as structure itself. At first glance, these sketches resemble doodles, circles, lines, nodes, but when compared, their similarity is striking. Different viewers, separated in time and circumstance, drew networks of spheres connected by arcs, flows radiating outward, voids marked by emptiness. Analysts labelled them symbolic overlays, dismissing them as abstractions. Yet decades later, when placed beside modern cosmological diagrams, the resemblance is uncanny. In 2014, astronomers announced the mapping of the Laniakea supercluster, the immense web of galaxies to which the Milky Way belongs. It is not a single cluster, but a vast structure of filaments and flows, galaxies streaming toward a gravitational centre called the Great Attractor. The maps of Laniakea show rivers of galaxies, nodes where filaments meet, voids where matter thins. To see them is to see the universe's cartography, drawn not in stars but in structures beyond comprehension. And when one places the Atlas sketches beside them, the parallels leap out. Nodes, filaments, flows, voids. Could remote viewers in the 1970s and 1980s have glimpsed such structures decades before science mapped them? Skeptics argue no. The human mind, when asked to imagine vastness, naturally produces webs and threads, images of connection. The similarity, they say, is coincidence, projection after the fact. But the believers see it differently. They suggest that the mind, in altered states, may perceive patterns not limited to sight, structures of reality that imprint themselves across consciousness. The Atlas maps in this view are not doodles but intuitive glimpses of cosmic architecture. The history of cartography itself lends weight to the metaphor. Ancient maps often mixed reality with vision, geography with myth. Medieval Mappa Mundi placed Jerusalem at the centre of the world, with oceans and monsters at the edges. Polynesian stick charts mapped currents and swells invisible to the eye, navigated not by sight but by feel. Aboriginal songlines mapped landscape through story and rhythm, guiding travel across vast distances without written charts. Each of these reflects a truth. Mapping is not only about terrain, it is about meaning. The Atlas sketches may be part of this tradition, maps not of Earth, but of a cosmos felt rather than seen. One viewer, after filling a page with arcs and circles, added a note. It flows like water, but it is not water. It moves everything, yet it is unseen. The description resembles scientific attempts to explain dark matter and dark energy, the invisible components that constitute most of the universe, guiding galaxies while remaining undetectable. Science reached this conclusion through mathematics, telescopes, and measurements. The viewer reached it through vision. The language differs, but the impression converges, unseen forces flowing, shaping, sustaining. Another sketch includes a large central void, with arrows pointing inward from surrounding circles. In the margin, all drawn toward the centre. This mirrors the modern concept of the Great Attractor, the mysterious gravitational anomaly pulling thousands of galaxies toward it. At the time of the Atlas sessions, the Great Attractor was only beginning to be suspected, not mapped. Yet here, decades earlier, a remote viewer described a flow toward a central pull. Coincidence, perhaps, or resonance. The cartographic motif runs deep in myth as well. Many cultures imagine the cosmos as a web or net. The Norse spoke of Yggdrasil, the world tree whose branches and roots connected realms. Hindu cosmology described Indra's net, an infinite lattice of jewels reflecting one another, symbolizing interconnection. Native American stories tell of Spider Grandmother weaving the world into being. The Atlas sketches echo these motifs, webs of connection, threads linking nodes, networks of light. The mind, when grasping for imagery of vastness, reaches instinctively for the web. What distinguishes the Atlas maps is their insistence on scale. The viewers did not describe local landscapes, they described something too big to see all at once. One wrote, "I cannot hold it in my mind, it stretches beyond me." This sense of immensity mirrors the challenge of cosmology itself. To map the universe requires abstraction, compression, diagrams that reduce the infinite to lines on paper. The Atlas maps may be early attempts at the same, glimpsed through vision rather than instrument. Science, of course, demands caution. Similarity does not prove connection. The webs drawn by remote viewers may be products of imagination, coincidentally resembling cosmic structures discovered later. But even if coincidence, the resonance is powerful. It shows how the human mind, in pursuit of meaning, reaches for forms that mirror the cosmos itself. Webs, flows, clusters. These are not only scientific diagrams, they are archetypes of vastness. The Atlas maps also raise another question. If they are maps, then maps of what? If they chart cosmic structures, then what is the role of the beacons and towers described elsewhere? Are they nodes within the web, instruments embedded in the lattice, or are they symbolic overlays, metaphors for forces beyond comprehension? The files do not answer. They offer fragments, sketches, phrases, numbers, without context. The burden of interpretation falls on us. One cannot help but imagine the scene. A remote viewer, eyes closed, describing lines and flows. A stenographer recording. An analyst frowning. A sketch pinned beside a cosmological chart decades later. The shapes eerily aligned. What does one do with such resonance? Skeptics dismiss, believers embrace, but the resemblance itself endures. The dream of the cartographer is to make sense of immensity, to take chaos and render it as pattern, to place oneself within the whole. The Atlas sketches embody this dream, whether as visions of reality or as symbols of longing. They chart not only the cosmos, but the human desire to map, to locate, to belong within the vastness. And so, Atlas becomes not only burden and beacon, but map-maker. The Titan who held the heavens now inscribes them on fragile paper. The remote viewers, reaching through silence, draw webs that echo the universe itself. The dream of the cartographer persists, unfinished, unresolved, but every map carries mystery. For maps not only reveal, they conceal. They show what is chosen, and they leave blank what is unknown. The Atlas maps too are incomplete, their edges fading into void. And in that incompleteness lies the next fragment. The closing of doors, the sealing of files, the silence imposed not by distance but by bureaucracy. Every archive has its silences, and sometimes those silences speak louder than the documents themselves. In the Atlas collection, the silence arrives abruptly. Sessions that began with detailed transcripts, sketches, and notes end without explanation. Files are sealed, references vanish, memos trail into nothing. It is as if a door closed suddenly, leaving only fragments on one side and questions on the other. The official history of remote viewing programs in the United States ends in the mid-1990s, when the CIA declared them terminated, unproven, and unnecessary. The documents were declassified, the story released, and the public moved on. But within the Atlas material there is a sense that something ended differently, less cleanly. Files stamped with the Atlas code cease without summary. The last pages carry annotations not of conclusion, but of cessation. No further work recommended. Classify under restricted access. Suspend until further notice. These phrases are not closure, they are interruption. One particularly stark memo reads, Atlas sessions terminated. Data inconsistent. Potential risk to subjects. Archive only. The language is bureaucratic, flat, yet the phrase potential risk to subjects lingers. Remote viewing was rarely described in terms of risk, beyond fatigue or stress. What risk did Atlas pose that other sessions did not? The memo offers no detail, only silence where explanation should be. Whispers within the community of former viewers suggest unease. Some spoke of subjects refusing to continue after Atlas sessions, of recurring dreams, of a lingering sense of heaviness. Whether these were genuine after effects or stories amplified by rumour is impossible to know. But the fact remains, Atlas was sealed, not concluded. The door was closed and no key left behind. Sealed doors are not unusual in intelligence work. Files are closed for reasons of classification, relevance, or simple neglect. But the Atlas closure feels different. It carries an aura of deliberate suppression, as if the content was not merely unhelpful, but unwelcome. Analysts could have dismissed the sessions as noise. Instead, they archived them, sealed them, and moved on without comment. Silence in this case became its own kind of classification. This silence resonates with older traditions of hidden knowledge. In monasteries and temples, certain texts were locked away, accessible only to initiates. In myth, forbidden doors guard realms too dangerous to enter. Pandora's box, the sealed cave, the chamber that must not be opened. To close a door is to acknowledge that what lies beyond it is potent, perhaps unbearable. The Atlas closure echoes this archetype. Something was glimpsed, something was recorded, and then the door was shut. Skeptics argue that this interpretation is romantic projection. Files are closed all the time, especially those with little practical value. Atlas, they say, was an anomaly that produced nothing actionable, and so it was shelved. The aura of secrecy is illusion. Yet the skeptics cannot explain why potential risk was invoked, or why the termination felt abrupt compared to other projects. Even within bureaucracy, the texture of silence matters. Some silences are routine, others vibrate with unease. The image of a closed door also mirrors the experience of the viewers themselves. Many sessions ended with abrupt refusal. I cannot continue. It is too much. The pressure is overwhelming. The viewer closed the door of the mind, sealing off the vision. The archive reflects the same gesture on a larger scale, an institution closing its door, unwilling to look further. The micro and the macro mirror each other, each closing where weight became unbearable. The myth of Atlas himself contains this resonance. Condemned to hold the heavens, Atlas was not permitted release. Yet in some versions of the story, Heracles offered him a moment's respite, taking the sky upon his own shoulders while Atlas fetched the golden apples. But when Atlas tried to refuse to take the burden back, Heracles tricked him into resuming it. The burden could not be laid down. The door could not remain open. In the end, Atlas returned to his silence, eternally carrying what must be carried. So too with the files. The burden was glimpsed, perhaps briefly shifted, but ultimately sealed away. The weight returned to silence. The door closed, and the burden remained on the other side. The closed door also raises questions about intent. Was Atlas sealed because it was too strange, too inconsistent, too unscientific? Or was it sealed because it touched something uncomfortably real, something that could not be admitted without destabilizing the categories of intelligence and science? The absence of explanation allows both interpretations to persist. The skeptic says dismissal, the believer says suppression. The truth may lie in the ambiguity itself. For those who look at the Atlas material today, the closed door is not an obstacle but an invitation. It invites speculation, interpretation, projection. What was risked? What was glimpsed? What required silence? In this way, the closure perpetuates the mystery. Had the files ended with neat summaries and dismissals, Atlas would have faded. Instead, the silence keeps it alive, humming faintly, unresolved. Even in astronomy, echoes of closed doors exist. Oumuamua passed too quickly to be imaged clearly. The door of opportunity closed before instruments could capture detail. The wow signal flared once and never repeated. The door of confirmation slammed shut. Fast radio bursts flicker unpredictably, vanishing before telescopes can focus, each as a door glimpsed but not opened. The cosmos itself seems to practice this gesture of closure, offering fragments and then sealing them away. Atlas, in its silence, mirrors the universe it sought to glimpse. The image that lingers is simple. A door, heavy and locked, in a corridor of archives. Behind it lie pages unread, visions unseen. The key is missing, or perhaps never existed. The door itself becomes symbol, a reminder of limits, of boundaries, of mysteries glimpsed but not entered. And yet, doors are never final. A closed door invites the question, what lies beyond? Even if never opened, it shapes imagination. In that sense, the closed door of Atlas is not the end but another beginning. It pushes the mystery outward, into speculation, into new searches. For as one door closes, another horizon opens. The cosmos did not end with Oumuamua. Astronomers expect more interstellar objects, more messengers from beyond. The watchers of Atlas may be silent, but their echoes return in predictions of the next visitor, the next arrival, the next glimpse of something not of Earth. The door may be sealed, but the sky remains open. When Oumuamua slipped out of sight, many thought the story had ended. A single messenger from the stars had passed through our sky, leaving only speculation in its wake. But astronomers were already calculating probabilities. The galaxy, they argued, must be filled with such wanderers, shards flung from planetary systems, drifting between stars for eons. If one had arrived, more would follow. The question was not if, but when. That prediction was fulfilled sooner than expected. In August 2019, an amateur astronomer named Gennady Borisov, scanning the night sky from his private observatory in Crimea, discovered another object on an interstellar trajectory. This one was clearer, brighter, easier to track. Designated 2I Borisov, it was unmistakably a comet, trailing a visible tail of gas and dust. Unlike Oumuamua, which remained enigmatic, Borisov fit comfortably within known categories. An interstellar visitor, yes, but a natural one, familiar in form. Still, it was confirmation. The solar system is not sealed. The door to the stars swings open, and objects drift through unannounced. The arrival of Borisov reignited speculation. If comets can wander between stars, might probes, artifacts, or signals do the same? Could the Atlas beacons, the humming machines glimpsed in vision, correspond not to natural bodies, but to engineered messengers slipping across systems as silently as Oumuamua? The question lingered, strengthened by Borisov's presence. The universe is porous, its boundaries more fluid than we imagined. What enters once can enter again. Within the Atlas files, the theme of recurrence appears subtly. One viewer, after describing a beacon, added a line in the margin. It has passed before, it will pass again. Another wrote, they are not singular. They travel in intervals. These notes, dismissed at the time as imaginative embellishment, gain new resonance in light of multiple interstellar visitors. The vision of recurrence becomes less metaphor and more echo of astronomical reality. Borisov, unlike Oumuamua, did not inspire the same level of controversy. Its nature as a comet was clear, its composition familiar, its behaviour predictable. Yet its very familiarity confirmed a larger truth. Interstellar objects are not rare curiosities but regular travellers. Their passage is part of the fabric of cosmic life. If two appeared within 2 years of each other, how many more pass unseen, too faint to detect? The question reframes the Atlas visions. Perhaps the viewers were not glimpsing singular anomalies, but a pattern of crossings, a network of objects moving along routes invisible to us. The idea of recurrence resonates deeply with myth. In many traditions, messengers from the heavens return in cycles. Comets were seen as harbingers, their reappearances marking epochs. The Mayan calendar tracked celestial cycles with astonishing precision, aligning human events with cosmic rhythms. Hindu cosmology speaks of yugas, vast ages repeating endlessly. The Atlas notes, with their emphasis on intervals and return, echo this ancient intuition that the cosmos is not random but cyclical, its messengers recurring like tides. Science too acknowledges cycles. Stars are born, burn, collapse and seed new stars. Galaxies collide, merge and scatter. Even interstellar objects follow statistical rhythms, their arrivals governed by probabilities shaped across eons. The Atlas visions cast in mythic language may simply reflect this cosmic truth. What has passed will pass again. But there is another possibility, more unsettling. If some interstellar objects are natural, comets like Borisov, could others be artificial? Could a mixture of wanderers move through the cosmos, some born of collision and chance, others built by intelligence drifting along the same currents? To distinguish one from the other would require instruments we do not yet possess. To the human eye, both would appear as faint dots of light, indistinguishable. Only when behavior defies expectation, as with Oumuamua, do we glimpse the possibility of something more. The Atlas transcripts hint at this ambiguity. Some describe the objects as natural, vast, impersonal. Others describe them as instruments, humming with intent. The line between the two is blurred. Machines that wait, signals not for us, structures indifferent to our presence. These could be natural or artificial, depending on perspective. A pulsar is a beacon of sorts, yet wholly natural. A satellite is natural in form, but artificial in function. The viewers may have perceived both without distinction. The return of interstellar objects also raises a practical question. What should we do when the next arrives? Oumuamua slipped past too quickly. Borisov was too far, but perhaps the next can be intercepted. Proposals exist to launch probes capable of pursuing such visitors, to meet them not with telescopes but with instruments at close range. The technology is within reach, though costly. The choice lies not in ability but in will. Here too, Atlas whispers. If the beacons are sending endlessly, not to us but to others, then our interception may be irrelevant. We may be like insects glimpsing a lighthouse, interpreting its signal without being its audience. To approach a visitor may bring knowledge, or it may bring only the realization that we are trespassers in a conversation not meant for us. The viewers felt this deeply, the sense of being observed but ignored, of overhearing without belonging. The same may hold true if we ever touch an interstellar messenger directly. The return of objects also complicates the myth of uniqueness. For centuries, humans imagined themselves at the center of the cosmos. Each anomaly, a comet, a meteor, a burst of light, was interpreted as directed at us, message for us. But the recurrence of interstellar wanderers suggests otherwise. The cosmos is not centered. Its messengers are not singular. They pass through countless systems, indifferent to who notices. We are one shore among many. To glimpse an object is not to be chosen, but to be incidental. This realization is humbling and perhaps unsettling, and yet recurrence is also reassurance. The door that closed with Oumuamua is not final. Others will come. More chances will appear. The silence is not absolute. The cosmos will continue to send, whether by chance or design. Our task is to be ready, to listen, to map, to endure the waiting. The return of the object reframes Atlas itself. No longer a singular anomaly sealed behind a closed door, it becomes part of a cycle. Fragments of vision anticipating fragments of reality, both pointing toward recurrence. The hum is not one note, but rhythm. The map is not one place, but pattern. The burden is not one weight, but endless carrying. And as we anticipate the next visitor, the next fragment of contact, the question deepens. Are these messengers only rocks and ice? Or are they carriers of something more? Do they hum only with the silence of physics, or with the faint resonance of intention? The answer may remain beyond us, sealed like Atlas itself. But the recurrence ensures that the question will return, again and again, as surely as the objects themselves. The next part of the story moves beyond objects and visions, into the realm of legacy. The question of what remains when the files are sealed, when the messengers pass, when the burden endures. What echoes persist, not in stars or transcripts, but in us. When the last Atlas file was stamped and sealed, when the official programs were shuttered and the Cold War receded into history, The vision might have ended there, a forgotten project, another curiosity of intelligence work. Yet Atlas did not vanish. It lingered, not in official reports, but in fragments that seeped into culture, art, and imagination. Its legacy is not of proof, but of persistence, the way a hum remains in the air long after the machine has gone silent. Writers were among the first to pick up the fragments. In obscure magazines and underground forums of the late 1990s, whispers of Atlas began to circulate. A story about remote viewers glimpsing machines beyond the sky, about maps of webs and clusters, about signals not meant for us. The details varied, distorted in retelling, but the core motifs remained. Atlas became myth once more, woven into science fiction novels, whispered in conspiracy circles, referenced obliquely in poetry and art. Its imagery, towers, webs, beacons, slipped into culture like seeds carried on the wind. Artists found resonance in the sketches. The crude drawings of circles and lines meant as data points were reinterpreted as symbols. Exhibitions displayed them beside astronomical maps, inviting viewers to ponder the overlap. Installations recreated the humming towers as sound sculptures, vibrations moving through the chest of the listener. Painters rendered the webs of light as cosmic dreamscapes, half science, half vision. In these works, Atlas was not treated as intelligence, but as inspiration. The fragments, stripped of context, became art. In popular culture, echoes of Atlas appear subtly. Films that depict colossal machines waiting in silence, novels that describe maps of stars drawn by vision, music that layers low hums beneath melodies, all carry traces of the imagery. Whether these artists knew of Atlas directly or absorbed its motifs through cultural diffusion is impossible to say. But the persistence of the imagery suggests that Atlas touched something archetypal, something that resonates regardless of source. Even in science, the legacy persists in subtler form. Astronomers, though skeptical of remote viewing, speak of cosmic beacons, of gravitational towers, of webs of light. The language overlaps with Atlas, not because of influence, but because the same motifs arise when confronting vastness. The metaphors converge, science and vision, each grappling with scale, each reaching for imagery that makes the incomprehensible tangible. The legacy of Atlas also lives in personal accounts. Some former viewers, long after the programs ended, spoke cautiously in interviews. They described the sessions not as proof of anything cosmic, but as experiences that marked them. One recalled the sensation of pressure in the chest. I still feel it sometimes when the sky is clear. Another remembered the vision of webs. It was like being part of something larger. I can't explain it, but it changed how I see the night. These testimonies, though anecdotal, reveal that Atlas was not only archive, it was imprint. The experiences lingered in those who carried them, shaping their relationship to the cosmos. The myth of Atlas himself embodies this idea of persistence. Condemned to hold the heavens, he could not lay down his burden. The task was eternal, the posture unchanging. So too with the Atlas project. Though the files were sealed, the burden of the vision could not be set aside. It pressed outward into culture, resurfacing in new forms, refusing silence. The hum endured, carried by memory, rumour, and imagination. In the digital age, Atlas has taken on a new life. Online communities dedicated to unsolved mysteries dissect the fragments, comparing sketches to cosmic maps, aligning numbers with star coordinates, speculating endlessly. Some threads spiral into elaborate conspiracies, that Atlas revealed alien communication, that it was suppressed deliberately, that its symbols hold keys to hidden knowledge. Others approach with more restraint, treating Atlas as metaphor, as a lens through which to view the human hunger for contact. In both cases, the fascination remains. The sealed door has not diminished interest, it has amplified it. What makes Atlas persist is not evidence, but ambiguity. If the files had revealed clear fraud, the story would have ended. If they had revealed undeniable proof, the story would have transformed into fact. But they revealed fragments, sketches, phrases, impressions that refuse both dismissal and confirmation. Ambiguity is fertile. It allows endless retelling, endless reinterpretation. Atlas lives in that fertile ground, a mystery without conclusion, a burden without resolution, the legacy also lies in how Atlas reframes the human condition. To glimpse towers that hum without sound, to sketch webs that resemble galaxies, to feel signals not meant for us. These experiences remind us of our place in the cosmos. Small, peripheral, overhearing a conversation too vast to join. Whether real or imagined, the visions confront us with scale, with indifference, with burden. And yet, they also invite wonder. If there are beacons, even if not for us, then we live in a universe that hums with messages. If there are maps beyond Earth, even if fragmentary, then we inhabit a cosmos threaded with meaning. The Titan Atlas became a symbol of endurance, his punishment transformed into inspiration. Athletes, companies, artists adopted his name to signify strength, resilience, vision. The Atlas project follows the same pattern. What began as secrecy and confusion has become symbol, its fragments reinterpreted as strength, as mystery, as endurance of the unknown. The name lives on, carrying weight beyond its files, yet legacy is not static. It evolves as new events occur. Oumuamua, Borisov, fast radio bursts, the mapping of the cosmic web, all reframed Atlas, giving its fragments new contexts. Future discoveries will do the same. Each anomaly, each messenger, each signal will echo backward, reshaping the story, keeping it alive. The legacy of Atlas is unfinished, open-ended, carried forward by whatever the cosmos reveals next. And so, Atlas persists, less as project, more as symbol, less as file, more as hum. It endures in culture, in art, in memory, in imagination. The closed door could not contain it. The burden remains, carried forward into every new question about signals, messengers, and maps of the unseen. Yet every legacy, no matter how enduring, points toward horizon. What remains is not only memory but anticipation, the sense that something waits, that the next fragment is near, that the hum is not past but present. And it is to this horizon that we now turn, the search for what lies beyond the sealed files, beyond the legacy, beyond even the myth. Every mystery casts its gaze forward. Atlas began as fragments in a Cold War archive, visions of towers and beacons. Yet even as its files were sealed, its resonance pointed beyond itself, toward skies not yet mapped, instruments not yet built, and questions not yet asked. To follow Atlas is to stand at a horizon, knowing that what lies beyond is not conclusion but continuation. In astronomy, that horizon is widening. Telescopes now probe deeper than ever before. The James Webb Space Telescope with its golden mirrors has begun to reveal galaxies from the earliest epochs of the universe, structures so distant that their light began its journey before Earth existed. Radio arrays stretch across continents, linking signals to form an ear pressed against the cosmos. Soon, projects like the Square Kilometre Array will expand this hearing to scales unimaginable, listening for whispers buried in the static of creation. What Atlas glimpsed through vision, these instruments may glimpse through light and sound, webs of galaxies, flows of energy, signals that flare and vanish. Astronomers also prepare for the next interstellar messenger. Oumuamua and Borisov were only the beginning. New surveys scan the sky relentlessly, ready to catch faint streaks of light moving too fast for local origin. The next visitor may arrive within years, and this time probes may be launched to meet it. Plans already exist for spacecraft propelled by solar sails or advanced ion drives, fast enough to chase a passing object. If such a mission succeeds, humanity may, for the first time, touch something born of another star. Whether rock or artifact, the encounter would stretch imagination to breaking. Yet the horizon is not only technological, it is also inner. Neuroscience continues to explore consciousness, mapping its rhythms with increasing precision. Studies of meditation, altered states, and brainwave entrainment reveal how perception shifts, how doors open and close within the mind. Perhaps in time, science will uncover whether remote viewing is invention or reception, whether the Atlas visions were fantasy or fragments of signal. The mind itself remains a frontier, as vast in its way as the cosmos. Between outer and inner horizons lies a question that will not vanish. What if both are true? What if the cosmos does send signals, and the mind is capable, however briefly, of perceiving them? The idea blurs categories, dissolving the line between telescope and trance, between science and myth. Skeptics resist such blurring, insisting on separation. Yet Atlas itself defies separation. Its visions resonate with cosmology, its sketches with cosmic maps, its fragments with anomalies. The frontier may not lie in choosing one over the other, but in holding both, as reflections of a reality too large for a single lens. The horizon is also cultural. Humanity now speaks of colonizing Mars, of sending probes to the outer planets, of searching for life in the oceans of Europa or Enceladus. Each new step outward carries echoes of Atlas, the sense of trespass, of entering realms not meant for us. The beacons described in vision, indifferent to our presence, mirror the silence of space itself. Whether life awaits or only emptiness, the experience will be the same. To stand small before immensity, to feel the hum of a cosmos that continues regardless of our gaze. And still, the question persists. What lies beyond silence? If the wow signal was a fragment, if Oumuamua was a messenger, if Atlas glimpsed beacons not for us, then what waits at the horizon? A universe filled with signals, humming endlessly, indifferent to our comprehension? Or a universe where silence is the signal, where indifference itself is the message? Both possibilities are daunting. To find others is to confront the reality that we are not unique. To find no one is to confront the weight of solitude in a cosmos beyond measure. The myth of Atlas speaks again here. The Titan's burden was eternal, his horizon endless. He carried without relief, without resolution. Humanity too carries a burden of seeking meaning in a universe that offers no clear answer. We lift our instruments, our visions, our myths, and we carry them forward, knowing they may never resolve. The horizon recedes as we approach, always beyond, always unfinished. Some argue that this is the true message of Atlas, not proof of machines or beacons, but the experience of carrying the question itself. To hold the sky of possibility, to endure the weight of uncertainty, to live beneath a dome that may be silent or filled with voices. The burden is not punishment but condition. To be human is to seek, to imagine, to listen, even when no reply comes. Yet horizons are not only burdens, they are invitations. To see a horizon is to know there is more. The Atlas visions, fragmentary though they are, invite us to keep looking. The anomalies of science, incomplete though they remain, invite us to keep listening. The sealed door, closed though it is, invites us to keep imagining. The horizon beyond is not an end but a call, and so we stand between silence and possibility, burden and invitation, myth and science. The legacy of Atlas points us forward, not with clarity but with resonance. It hums in culture, in art, in memory, in the very structure of the cosmos. It reminds us that to search is to endure, and to endure is to live beneath weight. At the edge of this horizon, one last image gathers, a door half open, light spilling through, shapes beyond not yet clear. It is neither proof nor dismissal, neither conclusion nor silence. It is possibility itself, the space between what is known and what is imagined. The horizon beyond Atlas is not a destination. It is the perpetual opening of the next question, the next vision, the next hum. And from this horizon, we move toward the final fragment. Not a conclusion, but an image, a symbol, a gesture that remains open, carrying the resonance forward. Every story yearns for ending, yet some resist conclusion. Atlas belongs to this latter kind. It began as fragments in the margins of Cold War secrecy, sketches of towers, whispers of beacons, sensations of weight and pressure. It grew into echoes of myth, into anomalies of science, into questions that linger still. To end such a story would be to betray it, for its essence is not resolution but continuation. And so we arrive at the final image, not as closure but as symbol, something left ajar, humming with possibility. The Titan Atlas remains our guide. Bound by punishment, he bore the heavens eternally. In some depictions he bends beneath the globe, muscles taut, gaze fixed downward. In others, he stands upright, the celestial sphere balanced with grim dignity. In all, he embodies endurance. His image appears in sculpture, in paintings, in the very word Atlas that names our maps. He is myth transformed into cartography, burden into symbol. The remote viewing project that bore his name followed the same arc. From burden to symbol, from secrecy to echo, from silence to resonance. If Atlas the Titan bore the heavens, what did Atlas the project bear? Not proof, not data, not closure. It bore uncertainty. It carried fragments that could not be dismissed, yet could not be confirmed. It endured in ambiguity, unrelieved, unresolvable. In this way, the name was fitting. The viewers, like the Titan, shouldered visions too heavy to hold, yet impossible to set aside. The analysts, like Atlas, carried files that led nowhere, yet could not be discarded. The burden was not sky, but silence. The final image, then, is not a conclusion but a door. In the Atlas files, the last pages are blank, marked only with stamps of classification. The door is closed. Yet even in closure, the imagination presses against it, wondering what lies beyond. The blank page becomes a canvas inviting projection. The closed door becomes a threshold hinting at passage. The silence becomes a hum. Symbols accumulate around this image. The beacon that sends endlessly, not for us, but overheard in passing. The map that charts webs and flows, not of Earth, but of cosmos. The object that passes through the solar system, silent, indifferent, a messenger without message. The brain that hums in theta rhythms, glimpsing visions half-formed, half-felt. Each is fragment. Together, they form not answer, but resonance, a chorus of unfinished notes. Perhaps this is the true lesson of Atlas, that mystery is not to be solved, but to be carried. Like Atlas himself, humanity carries the burden of unanswered questions. We stand beneath the sky, aware of its immensity, aware of our smallness, aware that we are both trespassers and participants in a conversation we do not understand. The burden is heavy, but it is also what gives life meaning. Without it, the sky would collapse into silence, and we would collapse with it. The final image may be imagined as a landscape, a plain of metal, towers rising, humming in silence. Beyond them, a horizon too vast to see, a web of light threading through darkness. In the centre, a beacon sending, indifferent, unceasing. A human figure stands at the edge, small, fragile, watching, listening. The figure cannot join the signal, cannot lift the weight, cannot open the map, yet the figure endures, standing as witness. That figure is Atlas. That figure is us. Or perhaps the final image is more abstract. A hum that begins faintly, inaudible, then grows until it is felt in the chest, vibrating through bone. Not sound, not light, but pressure. It surrounds, it penetrates, it overwhelms. Then, abruptly, it ceases. Silence returns, but the body remembers the vibration. The silence is not empty, it carries the echo. The hum continues, not in the air, but in memory. That is Atlas, a resonance that lingers after the source has gone. Or perhaps the final image is celestial, a night sky, clear and vast. Stars scatter across it, some steady, some flickering. A comet passes, tail streaming. A faint burst flares in radio static, gone before it can be recorded. Far beyond, an object crosses silently, unseen except for a brief glint. The sky is alive with fragments, each carrying meaning, each indifferent to us. The watcher stands beneath it, aware of being small, aware of being watched, aware of the silence that hums with signals. That silence is Atlas. The image cannot be singular, for Atlas is not singular. It is burden and beacon, map and machine, myth and science, silence and hum. Its final form is multiplicity, unresolved. To choose one ending would be to betray its essence. The true final image is open, unfinished, waiting like the beacons themselves. And so, the story ends where it began, with possibility. Atlas remains sealed, yet alive. Its fragments circulate, its echoes persist, its resonance continues. Whether myth or signal, noise or message, imagination or reality, it endures. Like the Titan himself, it cannot lay down its burden. Like the beacons, it sends endlessly, waiting not for us, yet overheard all the same. Like the horizon, it recedes as we approach, drawing us forward into the next question. The final image, then, is not of closure, but of a door half open. Light spills through, shapes move beyond, indistinct. The hum is faint but present. The burden is felt but unseen. We stand before it, uncertain, uneasy, curious. The door does not close, it does not open, it remains ajar, eternal. That is Atlas. That is its legacy. That is its mystery.